the worlds of the heavens starting with Game of Thrones. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51. The army gathers. In the north, Winterfell. In the Lord's Hall, Maester Luwin, holding a letter from Castle Black, hurried to find the King of the North, Eddard Stark. Maester, don't be anxious. If you have anything to say, take your time. Maester Luwin calmed down a little after hearing this, and handed the letter in his hand to Eddard. Lord Eddard, this is a letter from Castle Black. Eddard did not comment. He reached out and took the letter. The content of the letter was very brief. Eddard just glanced at it and read the entire content of the letter. After a brief pause, Eddard turned to Sir Roderick, who was standing by, and said, "Sir, convey my order and tell all the lords in the north that I will give them half a month to gather in Winterfell with their knights and soldiers. We have a big battle to fight. Obey your will, King of the North." Ravens flew out of Winterfell one by one. All the major lords in the north, even the lords of the Riverlands, received letters from Eddard ordering them to lead their troops north. The raven flew over the Trident River, flew to King's Landing, and fell into the hands of Lord Tywin. The royal meeting was held again, and Lord Tywin made a strong speech to mobilize the army of the West and go to the wall. When this order came, King Joffrey and Queen Mother Cersei were dumbfounded. They had always regarded the Starks in the north as their great enemies, but now they had to cooperate with the Stark family to fight against the White Walkers together. It's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. His Majesty was furious in Meagher's Tower, unwilling to believe that all this happened. In fact, except for a few people, most of the nobles in King's Landing could not believe that this was an order issued by Duke Tywin. And Duke Tywin's intention this time was so firm. His biological daughter, the nominal Queen Mother of the Seven Kingdoms, Cersei Lannister, personally persuaded Tywin not to mention whether the attack of the White Walkers was true or not. Even if it was true, the North would bear the brunt. After the North was destroyed, they would send troops to destroy the White Walkers. Wouldn't it be better? Queen Mother Cersei did not realize how terrible the White Walkers were. According to insiders, after Queen Mother Cersei said this, Duke Tywin just looked at his daughter coldly and said to the Queen Mother, "How could I give birth to such a stupid daughter like you?" For a while, the whole King's Landing was in turmoil, but many people did not understand the truth, that the truth is in the hands of those with big fists. No matter what kind of conspiracy or trick, in the face of absolute power, all are vulnerable. Even the Tyrell family, which was the most powerful, could only obey the will of Duke Tywin and march north together. The wall, Castle Black. Commander Mormont, you don't need to persuade me anymore. I witnessed the existence of the White Walkers in the land of eternal winter. Resisting the White Walkers is not only the responsibility of the Night's Watch, but also the responsibility of all life in Westeros. The young wolf's face was full of determination, and he said in a tone of fearlessness, "Of course, all life in Westeros naturally includes the wildlings outside the wall." And Commander Mormont did not recognize Robb's ulterior motives at all. Robb stayed in Castle Black very firmly for this reason. And with the arrival of the Northern Army, everyone was working hard to fight against the attack of the White Walkers. Soldiers were training, making dragon crystal weapons, and they were racing against time to strengthen their strength. "My lord, this is a gift I specially gave you." Eddard also came to Castle Black, and he specially prepared a gift for Xia Changqing. Swish. Eddard pulled out a sword with a sharp blade and intricate inscriptions carved on it. Eddard introduced it to Xia Changqing. "My lord, this is a sword made of Valyrian steel. I hope you can use it to end the threat from the White Walkers." Xia Changqing took the sword from Eddard and waved it a few times. It was surprisingly suitable for him. "Eddard, where did you get such a Valyrian steel sword?" As far as Xia Changqing knew, Valyrian steel was a very rare metal. Every weapon made of Valyrian steel could become a family heirloom. "I melted the inherited sword of the Stark family and remade 2 swords. One of them was given to Robb, and this one is for you, my lord." Eddard explained lightly, not feeling any heartache for the disappearance of his family heirloom. Xia Changqing looked at Eddard with a little surprise. He knew that the Stark family had a Valyrian steel sword named Ice, but he didn't expect Edward to be so willing to give it up. My lord, you don't have to worry about it. Ice is originally a two-handed sword. It is too heavy and not suitable for fighting. It is better to melt it and rebuild it so that it can play its due role. Edward himself didn't care. If Xia Changqing kept procrastinating, it would seem that he was too hypocritical. Edward, then I will be disrespectful. Xia Changqing did not hide his love for this sword. Edward also showed a rare smile on his face. A good horse deserves a good saddle, and a sword is given to a hero. He thought that this sword would play its role better in Xia Changqing's hands. My lord, every Valyrian steel sword is a rare treasure. My lord, please give it a name. A name? Xia Changqing stroked the sword body that was as cold as ice with his palm while thinking carefully. Edward, the motto of your Stark family is winter is coming. Then this sword should be called Winter. Winter? Winter. What a good name. Edward praised. At this moment, Robb suddenly pushed the door open. Xia Changqing turned around and saw that Robb had changed the long sword hanging on his waist. Robb, did you come to me to show off your new sword? Xia Changqing said jokingly. Sorry, you are late. As he spoke, Xia Changqing showed off his new winter. Robb was a little amused. He looked at Xia Changqing speechlessly. My lord, I didn't expect you to have such a side. I didn't come here to show off to you. Someone just came to the Black Castle. I think you should meet her. Isn't it normal for someone to come to the Black Castle now? Could it be that Lord Tywin brought someone here? Xia Changqing walked out obediently, looking at Robb in confusion. Today, the Black Castle has become the center of the entire Westeros. A large number of people gather here every day. No matter who comes, Xia Changqing will not be surprised. Chapter 52. A disagreement leads to beheading. Lady Melisandre? Xia Changqing looked at the Red Witch in front of him with a little surprise. If he hadn't known that she was old enough to be his grandmother, Xia Changqing might have been attracted by Melisandre's beauty. But Xia Changqing was very sure of Melisandre's true appearance, so when he saw her enchanting face and figure, Xia Changqing only felt a chill in his heart. Of course, he would never show it on the surface. I wonder what you are doing here? Xia Changqing still maintained enough respect for a priest of a true god. Although Edward and Robb were very surprised by Xia Changqing's attitude, they naturally heard about the Red Witch, and she should be assisting Stannis. Your Excellency, I follow the command of the Lord of Light, and come here to find the reincarnation of Azor Ahai to assist him in defeating the representative of the God of Cold. Oh, isn't the reincarnation of Azor Ahai Lord Stannis? Why are you here at Castle Black instead of assisting him at Dragonstone? Xia Changqing could swear that he definitely did not mean to mock Melisandre. In fact, although Melisandre is a priestess of the Lord of Light, Xia Changqing did not see her playing any role in the fight against the White Walkers. It's not that Melisandre resurrected Jon, which can be regarded as the only right thing she did. Whether it was using the Shadow Killer to kill Renly, or misinterpreting the information from the flames, Xia Changqing thought that Melisandre was too incompetent. However, the Red Witch's ability to control fire was still pleasing to the eye. Stannis is not the reincarnation of Ahai. I misunderstood the will of the Lord of Light, so I'm here to make up for my mistake. Melisandre's expression did not change at all because of Xia Changqing's words. She said in a calm tone, "Do you think Ahai's reincarnation is in Castle Black?" Xia Changqing's tone was polite and distant. He was polite because Melisandre was a priest of the Lord of Light, and distant because Xia Changqing could not stand Melisandre's behavior of burning living people. And now that he has resurrected Jon, he doesn't need Melisandre at all. Xia Changqing wanted to stay away from Melisandre. After all, the Lord of Light is a real god. Melisandre also saw that Xia Changqing did not welcome her at all. Lord Xia, you don't seem to like me. Melisandre asked knowingly. Yes, I don't like you. Xia Changqing did not hide it. Since you asked, I will answer you honestly. Then, sir, can you tell me why you don't like me? Hearing this question, Xia Changqing suddenly thought of Stannis' poor daughter, who was burned alive because of Melisandre's words. Why should I like you, a person who wants to burn a little girl alive? Xia Changqing said in a cold tone. A flash of realization flashed across the face of the Red Witch, but she did not feel the slightest bit of guilt. That was not a sacrifice for no reason, but to sacrifice my lord, the Lord of Light, and to get the revelation of my lord. Bullshit. Xia Changqing cursed loudly, and his face showed anger. I have never heard of any god who needs believers to burn a little girl. The 7 gods don't. The old gods don't. The drowned god doesn't. Why would the Lord of Light have one? Lady Melisandre, can you tell me, is the Lord of Light a false god, an evil god? Xia Changqing felt that he could not suppress the anger in his heart at all. He was angry at Melisandre's expression as it should be. Stannis' daughter is so innocent, let alone the noble purpose of saving Westeros. Moreover, when Melisandre wanted to burn Shireen to death as a sacrifice, her purpose was not to save Westeros. Shut up. The Red Witch's face changed drastically because of Xia Changqing's words, and she scolded him in a hurry. The majesty of God cannot be desecrated. Stranger, although I can't see your origin, you are definitely not the messenger of the old gods. Even if you are an old god, it is difficult to fight against my lord. I see the darkness in your eyes. Melisandre suddenly screamed like a madman, and she looked at Xia Changqing with fear. However, Melisandre's words that belittled the old gods also made Eddard and Robb very dissatisfied. This is the Black Castle, which belongs to the north, and every northerner believes in the old gods. Clang. The long sword was unsheathed, and Eddard and Robb looked at Melisandre with unfriendly faces. As long as this Red Witch had any unusual movements, the two would never mind stabbing the sword into her body. Xia Changqing's anger quickly calmed down. His heart was cold. He knew that he had deeply offended the Red Witch in front of him, and perhaps indirectly offended the Lord of Light behind her. After all, Xia Changqing just called the Lord of Light a false god and an evil god. He originally wanted to stay away from him. How could things develop like this? Xia Changqing smiled bitterly in his heart. Although he had deeply offended Melisandre, Xia Changqing would never regret it, because he just didn't like her. Melisandre stared at Xia Changqing, but her steps were moving back little by little. Those who blaspheme will be despised by the gods. After a brief silence, Xia Changqing looked at the Red Witch with a bad look. Ms. Melisandre, is this your curse on me? Stranger, this is your inevitable end. Melisandre said to Xia Changqing with certainty. Xia Changqing sighed in his heart. He lowered his head slightly, stared at his toes, and said in a faint tone, Lady Melisandre, I don't know if you have asked, but I'm actually very narrow-minded. What? Melisandre looked at Xia Changqing in astonishment. I said, you are defeated. Xia Changqing had long been fed up with the Red Witch's nonsense. He pulled out the winter he had just obtained, and flew towards Melisandre. He wanted to try to keep her here. Since he had offended her, he might as well offend her directly to the end. Xia Changqing looked cold, and the blade of the Valyrian steel sword winter was even more cold. Swish, a sword wind whistled past. The Red Witch did not expect from the bottom of her heart that Xia Changqing would dare to choose to attack her directly. Although she was a priest of the Lord of Light and an old monster who had lived for hundreds of years, she was actually still a mortal. As a mage, remember, never let melee professionals get close. A sharp cold light flashed, and a beautiful head soared into the sky. Blood splattered and fell on the snow. What a beautiful picture of plum blossoms on the snow. Chapter 53, looking directly at the gods, beauty fades quickly. Xia Changqing leaned on his sword, and looked at Melisandre's headless body, without any fluctuations in his heart. Since you can't become one of us, then I will create conditions to make you one of us. This was the thought that flashed through Xia Changqing's mind, but he felt that he had gone a little too far. Because he was afraid of the witch Melisandre's methods, he chose the most cruel method and directly cut off Melisandre's head. Xia Changqing turned his head and glanced at the expressions of Eddard and Robb. Neither of them showed that there was anything wrong, which made Xia Changqing feel a little relieved. Robb, you won't blame me for suddenly killing this witch, right? Xia Changqing narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Robb with a smile. However, Robb did have a puzzled look on his face. He asked in confusion, why should I blame you? I have also heard of the reputation of this witch. Stannis' failure on the Blackwater River was largely due to the witch's bewitching. Robb's implication was that you killed her well. After Melisandre bewitched and harmed Stannis, she came to the Black Castle to bewitch them. Robb was also very disgusted in his heart. In this case, please help the young wolf to put her head back. As a priest of the Red God, she has a lot of knowledge that we need in her mind. Xia Changqing said to Rob as a matter of course. There were only 3 people present, so this job could only be given to Rob. Rob was speechless for a while. He looked at Xia Changqing with resentment, but he also knew that he could not escape. Even if he didn't have to do it himself, he had to do the errands. Wait, I'll go and call someone. Rob turned around and walked into the Black Castle. Xia Changqing smiled and watched Rob leave, but when he turned his eyes back, he unexpectedly found something strange about Melisandre's body. Thinking of the witch's mysterious powers, Xia Changqing and Ed looked at each other, drew their swords at the same time, and looked at Melisandre's body with caution. The shadow under Melisandre's body suddenly moved by itself, as if it had its own life, swimming like water, climbing along Melisandre's body. A human-shaped black shadow rose from Melisandre's body, swaying like a candle. Xia Changqing suddenly felt as if his head was hit by a sledgehammer, buzzing, and at the same time, a great sense of fear rose in his heart, and a strong pressure acted on him. What is this? Xia Changqing's thinking was extremely slow. He wanted to raise his hand to fight back, but found that his whole body was like rust and difficult to control. The shadow was like a god overlooking the mortals. Although it was completely dark, Xia Changqing felt as if a pair of ruthless eyes were staring at him. Don't look directly at a god. This thought suddenly flashed through Xia Changqing's mind. Facing this shadow, he felt as if he had seen a god. After a few seconds or a day or two, the shadow that rose from Melisandre suddenly broke and disappeared without a trace. Freed from the huge pressure, Xia Changqing couldn't help but bend down and retched violently. He resisted the feeling of nausea, straightened up, and looked at Edition. The King of the North was also full of horror. Lord Xia, what was that just now? Ed couldn't help asking. Xia Changqing looked at Melisandre's body with fear and whispered, I suspect it was an incarnation of the Lord of Light. Apart from the gods themselves, Xia Changqing really couldn't imagine what kind of existence in this world could give him such great pressure. The feeling just now was really like dying. Lord of Light. The look of horror in Ed's eyes remained the same. My lord, are you right? Xia Changqing did not answer Ed's question. He did not expect that after killing Melisandre, he would actually attract the Lord of Light, a real god. However, Xia Changqing was not too worried. Gods do not appear in the world. Although he is wary in his heart, he will never be afraid. If the Lord of Light could take action himself, Xia Changqing thought he would have died just now. Since he did not die just now, there is no need to be too afraid of the Lord of Light. Father, Lord Xia, what's wrong with you? What happened? Rob came up with a few northern soldiers. He looked at the 2 people with lingering fears and was full of doubts. He had just left for a short while. What happened? Xia Changqing and Ed looked at each other, and then Xia Changqing said, Rob, it's okay, let the brothers connect the witch's head. Xia Changqing kept silent about what happened just now. There was no need to tell others about the suspected appearance of gods, which would only increase panic. Xia Changqing and Ed looked at each other tacitly and chose to keep the matter to themselves. Rob's mind was not so delicate. After Xia Changqing chose not to say anything, he stopped asking and directly asked the northern soldiers to sort out Melisandre's body. Lord Xia, do you plan to wait here or go back to the room first? I will let the soldiers inform you after it is sorted out, Rob suggested. It was more comfortable to stay in the room in this icy and snowy weather. His suggestion was very pertinent. Before Xia Changqing could reply, he suddenly heard several soldiers shouting in fear. What happened? Xia Changqing asked immediately. He was still afraid that Melisandre's body would cause any more trouble. Sir, come and have a look. The soldier shouted, as if something had happened to Melisandre's body. Xia Changqing and the other 2 quickly stepped forward and came to Melisandre's side. How could this happen? Rob also screamed immediately. Although Melisandre's face still retained the look of shock and anger before her death, her originally beautiful and young face was rapidly aging. It seemed that the witch had gone from her prime to her old age in a short period of time. When the 3 approached, Melisandre's original long red hair had been replaced by white hair, and her face was also full of wrinkles and looked old. Xia Changqing was not very surprised, because he knew that Melisandre was an old woman who had lived for hundreds of years, and this should be her true appearance. If Xia Changqing remembered correctly, Melisandre relied on the magical ruby to maintain her youthful appearance. When Xia Changqing noticed the ruby collar on Melisandre's broken neck, the gem had lost its original bright color. Chapter 54, The Power of Fire and Shadow. Because of the loss of magical power, although her face quickly aged, I wonder if Melisandre's reason will collapse directly when she sees her appearance as an old lady after being resurrected. Xia Changqing thought with some malice in his heart that she was obviously an old woman, but she had to pretend to be young. He really wanted Stannis to see what Melisandre looked like now. Of course, Xia Changqing's idea might not be impossible to achieve, but this kind of immoral behavior only depends on whether he wants to do it. Don't be nervous, you continue your work. Xia Changqing comforted several northern soldiers and signaled them to continue their unfinished work. My lord, do you know what happened? After the three left, Robb couldn't help asking, is this the witch's evil magic? Xia Changqing glanced at Robb and didn't feel anything wrong. Ordinary people would be curious when seeing this situation. If he didn't know it in advance, he would be very curious. Yes, Robb, you are right. This is indeed a kind of magic. Don't look at Melisandre's beauty. In fact, she has lived for 300 or 400 years. Her current appearance is her true appearance. Xia Changqing explained to Robb calmly. After hearing this, the young wolf lord took a breath. A look of pain appeared on his face, and he said hesitantly, this kind of magic is too evil, too evil. Xia Changqing looked at Robb with amusement. It is easy to guess the thoughts of young people. In fact, Xia Changqing had to admit that the young-looking Melisandre was very attractive to people. When Xia Changqing saw Melisandre again, and was about to prepare to resurrect her, he suddenly felt a little reluctant. For a woman, it would be too cruel to let her keep this old appearance forever. However, this thought only flashed through Xia Changqing's mind. He would not let the witch, this helper, go. Respect my order and return. Xia Changqing secretly activated the skill of returning from the dead in his heart. Under the joint witness of Robb, Melisandre resurrected and returned. #An. Melisandre uttered a series of meaningless words, and then slowly opened her eyes. But in a moment, Melisandre had accepted her current state. Just looking at her face, it was just indifferent, and no other emotions could be seen. But Xia Changqing could still notice the obscure color flashing in Melisandre's eyes. Sure enough, the witch's heart was not so calm. Lady Melisandre. My lord, please wait a moment. Xia Changqing was interrupted by Melisandre as soon as he said it. My lord, please allow me some time to tidy myself up. It is too rude to answer your questions in my current appearance. Xia Changqing was speechless, but he did not force it. It was the most basic courtesy to respect an old man, so he pulled Robb out of the room. Half an hour later, Xia Changqing saw Melisandre again. Watching Melisandre staggering towards him, if Stannis were here now, he would never recognize that this was the original Red Witch. The witch wrapped her entire body in a red robe, with a hood on her head, completely covering her old face. It can be seen that Melisandre is still very concerned about her appearance. My lord, if you have any questions, please feel free to speak up. In Melisandre's steady and slow narration, some of Xia Changqing's questions were slowly answered. As a priest of the Lord of Light, Melisandre came to Westeros from Essos because she received the oracle from the Lord of Light through the flame. From the very beginning, Melisandre's purpose was also very simple, which was to help the humans of Westeros defeat the White Walkers. But she misinterpreted the oracle from the Lord of Light. In the flames, she saw the appearance of Dragonstone, so she went to Dragonstone and regarded Stannis as the man of destiny. However, Stannis was not the destined person. Dragonstone was only because it was covered with dragon crystal veins, and dragon crystal veins were important items for destroying and killing the army of whites, so the oracle of the Lord of Light showed Dragonstone. Dragonstone refers to Dragonstone, not a certain person. After Xia Changqing finished speaking about her speculations, Melisandre was stunned for a moment and sighed deeply. She had wasted a long time and made many mistakes without realizing it. When Xia Changqing asked again who was the real reincarnation of Azor in Melisandre's interpretation, Melisandre said Jon's name. Only when ice and fire meet can Westeros be truly saved. Melisandre said so to Xia Changqing. Ice and fire meet. This is in line with the theme of this world. But Xia Changqing wanted to try whether he, an unexpected person, could also create a new future for the continent of Westeros. Melisandre, your ability to manipulate fire, is it your own power, or the power of the Lord of Light? After listening to Melisandre's answer to his doubts, Xia Changqing asked about the witch's ability with interest. Whether it was the power of fire or the power of shadow, Xia Changqing was very interested. My lord, I disappoint you. Most of my power comes from the gift of the Lord of Light. When I died, the Lord of Light had already left me, so most of my power has been lost. Melisandre said lightly, her tone calm. Hearing that Melisandre had lost most of her power, Xia Changqing was indeed disappointed. He remembered that the witch's ability to attach fire to weapons with one hand was very useful for the army of dead ghosts. What a pity. Xia Changqing sighed, and he suddenly thought again, I wonder if I can learn this ability. Although I don't believe in the Lord of Light, I have a system and can cheat. A life of cheating needs no explanation. Under Xia Changqing's strong request, Melisandre finally agreed to show him her skills, but the witch didn't care much about Xia Changqing's suggestion to learn the power of fire and shadow. After losing most of her abilities, Melisandre couldn't cast too powerful magic, but after she reached out and touched Xia Changqing's sword, she still made winter suddenly burn with flames. Wow! Xia Changqing exclaimed. There was no material to burn, but the surface of the sword suddenly caught fire. If this is not magic, then what is magic? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55 Preparations for War. Melisandre teaches you fire magic. You have learned to control fire. Skill update. Fire attachment LV1, 0%. Skill description. Use weapons as firewood to burn a blazing flame with a slight magic breaking effect. The system is a rip-off. Xia Changqing shouted silently in his heart. It was indeed a cheating system. He did not need to understand the principles of witches using magic. Under the powerful functions of the system, it could directly become an ability he could control. After the knowledge of controlling fire was turned into a skill by the system, Xia Changqing naturally understood how to use this ability. My lord, with my current strength, I can only light a long sword. I'm powerless in fighting against the White Walkers, the Red Witch said in a hoarse voice. Xia Changqing, who only wanted to get a new skill for himself, did not hear what Melisandre said at all. He waved his hand indifferently and couldn't wait to experiment with his ability. The flames on winter slowly dissipated, revealing the smooth and bright blade. Although Xia Changqing wanted to test his own abilities right now, he wanted to squeeze out some other abilities from Melisandre. We'll talk about other things later. Show me your other abilities. Xia Changqing looked at Melisandre with shining eyes. The witch was really a treasure-old man. Who knows what surprises she can bring to him. Melisandre teaches you the power of shadows. You have learned to control shadows. Skill update. Power of shadows LV1, 0%. Skill description. Manipulate shadows like a spear or a sword. After Xia Changqing squeezed out another skill from Melisandre, he finally let her go with satisfaction. Melisandre was originally a priest of the Lord of Light, and her own power domain was flame and shadow. Now that she was in Xia Changqing's body, it was manifested into two skills. One skill was to attach flames to the weapon, which seemed to have the ability to break magic. This seemed to have a miraculous effect on the whites, but I don't know if it would hurt the White Walkers. But now Xia Changqing can't reach Melisandre's level at all. He can only add flames to one weapon. If he wants to add a second one, the flame on the first weapon will inevitably go out. As for manipulating the power of shadows, Xia Changqing can only barely make his shadow move, and his killing power is not at all. It's tasteless to eat, but it's a pity to throw it away. I just don't know if there will be new changes after the level is higher. Melisandre was surprised that Xia Changqing could master two abilities in such a short time. From that day on, Xia Changqing also had a strange man covered in red robes around him. Melisandre now doesn't want to show up in front of other people. She is just Xia Changqing's magic consultant. Not long after Melisandre arrived, Duke Tywin led the Westerland army to the Black Castle. Accompanying them were Duke Tywin's two sons, Jaime Lannister and Tyrion Lannister. The meeting between the wolf family and the lion family was extremely awkward. The two sides, who were originally mortal enemies, now had to cooperate again. It was just that Xia Changqing was there, so there was no major conflict between the two sides. So far, the entire wall of despair was already filled with Xia Changqing's army, and the Night's Watch was like waves merging into the sea, unable to stir up big waves at all. So although many Night's Watch were very dissatisfied with the strength of Xia Changqing and others, under the force of spears and swords, even the toughest Night's Watch dared not explode at this time. After most of the main personnel arrived, Xia Changqing convened the first pre-war meeting against the White Walkers. At this time, Xia Changqing sat on the main seat without hesitation. Eddard Stark sat on Xia Changqing's left hand with the Lords of the North, and Tywin Lannister sat on Xia Changqing's right hand with the Lords of the West. Together with Commander Mormont of the Night's Watch, the entire conference hall was full of talents. After this meeting, everyone confirmed what they had to do at the moment. One was to create a large number of dragon crystal weapons, and the other was to transform most of the soldiers into undead warriors. Dragon crystal veins are mainly found on Dragonstone, but now Dragonstone is still in Stannis' hands. Everyone unanimously agreed on the strategic intention for Dragonstone. Xia Changqing converted the soldiers as quickly as possible, turning them all into undead warriors, and began to march to Dragonstone. The mighty fleet of allied soldiers headed for Dragonstone, led by Xia Changqing, Eddard, and Tywin. The huge fleet directly surrounded Dragonstone. After Stannis saw the dire wolf flag and the lion flag appear together, his heart was already desperate. Without much resistance, Stannis collapsed and surrendered directly, and the entire Dragonstone fell into the hands of the coalition. After all, Stannis is a member of the Baratheon family. At Eddard's request, he received decent treatment, but he didn't think about commanding the army. From then on, he could just be an idle duke. All the original soldiers on Dragonstone were disbanded and reorganized, and filled into the coalition. So far, except for Dorne in the south, all the forces on the continent of Westeros have been concentrated together. This force is unprecedentedly powerful and unique. Xia Changqing is confident that even without the help of Daenerys' dragon, they can destroy the White Walkers and kill the Night King with their own strength. After taking control of Dragonstone, a large amount of dragon crystal ore was mined and transported to the Black Castle of the Wall by ship. Then the coalition recruited a large number of blacksmiths from various territories of the Seven Kingdoms, offered them generous conditions, and asked them to gather in the Black Castle to start forging dragon crystal weapons. Outside the wall, Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall, also led the wildling army to the wall little by little. As expected, a large number of Night's Watchmen expressed opposition to the entry of the wildlings. It's just a pity that the Night's Watchmen no longer have the final say in the wall, but Xia Changqing. The tunnel door of the wall opened, and the wildlings lined up, staring at the coalition forces vigilantly, and passed through the wall little by little. Under the control of Mance Rayder, the wildlings did not cause too much unrest, and the small-scale riots were suppressed by Mance Rayder himself. The Night's Watch, on the other hand, sadly found that they had no say at all. Even if they brought the incident to Commander Mormont, he had no way to deal with it. The wildlings' southward march was an inevitable trend, and it was not something that the Night's Watch could stop. The old, weak, women and children among the wildlings were arranged to live in the vast land of the north. Xia Changqing kept his word and gave them a large piece of land. The warriors who were able to fight were trained together with the coalition forces. Chapter 56 How to Lose with Dragon Riding on the Face. Time flies. After 6 months, Xia Changqing's plan to convert the coalition soldiers into undead warriors was finally successfully completed. Dragon crystal weapons were also continuously forged, and every coalition soldier replaced ordinary weapons with dragon crystal weapons. Although the completion of these things is somewhat time consuming, judging from the current speed, the coalition is ready much earlier than the time when the White Walkers broke through the wall in the original plot. The coalition soldiers have sharpened their knives, but the shadow of the White Walkers has not yet appeared. Xia Changqing was unwilling to spend too much time. After discussing with Eddard, Tywin and others, he decided to take the initiative. Since the White Walkers are not coming, we will take the initiative to fight. Many people were surprised by Xia Changqing's crazy plan, but Xia Changqing did not feel how crazy this plan was. Undead warriors plus dragon crystal weapons that specifically restrain whites. Everyone stood on the same starting line. Why can't the human coalition beat the army of whites? How can a flying dragon lose? Xia Changqing drew out the burning winter, and at a command, the coalition army stepped over the Great Wall, the battle line stretched out, and marched towards the land of eternal winter inch by inch. The elite cavalry formed a scout team to report various information between the coalition forces. Although the speed of the entire coalition army was not fast, it was steady and would not give the White Walkers any chance. At this time, the Night King had not accumulated all his strength, and he had not received the help of the dragon, and he had not even found the location of the three-eyed raven. Xia Changqing didn't know why the Night King was so obsessed with the three-eyed raven. In the original plot, the Night King was attracted by Bran, who had become the three-eyed raven, and was attacked by Arya. A generation of big men ended his life in such a dramatic way. This time, I will make you die very decently, Xia Changqing said secretly to the Night King, who had not yet met. Order, speed up. The order came from the Central Army, and was conveyed to the two wings. Lady Melisandre, do you know about the three-eyed raven? Three-eyed raven? Of course, my lord, I know about the existence of the three-eyed raven. This is what Xia Changqing suddenly thought of. Since the Night King is still searching for the whereabouts of the three-eyed raven, if they can find the three-eyed raven, then they can definitely find the Night King. Then do you know where the three-eyed raven is now? Xia Changqing looked at the Red Witch with expectant eyes, but she shook her head directly at Xia Changqing. My lord, I have lost contact with the Lord of Light, otherwise I could get the oracle from the flame and know the location of the three-eyed raven, but now I can't do it. Xia Changqing nodded slightly disappointedly. He didn't have much hope in the first place. My lord, no one present can compare to me in terms of familiarity with the land of eternal winter. At this moment, Mance Rayder suddenly spoke out. Xia Changqing looked at Mance Rayder with great surprise. He almost forgot about this old wild man. The wild men had been living in the land of eternal winter and must be very familiar with this place. Immediately, Xia Changqing told him the characteristics of the place where the three-eyed crow was. After thinking for a long time and finding the real old man and the wild army to discuss it together, Mance Rayder finally told Xia Changqing the location of that place. It was a mountain called Treehorn Mountain not far from the Windy Gorge. Xia Changqing was overjoyed. He thought that the three-eyed crow would use his magic to hide his location, but he didn't expect that the old wild man actually knew that place. In the case of not being able to find the White Walkers, Xia Changqing ordered the army to go to the location of the three-eyed crow. As the coalition forces went deeper, they finally encountered scattered whites. It was time to test the soldiers' combat effectiveness. The whites' favorite thing to do was to sneak attack at night, but the coalition soldiers were not afraid of their sneak attacks at all with the blessing of immortality. Countless whites fell under the dragon crystal swords of the coalition soldiers, and every day new combat intelligence was delivered to the Central Army camp, where Xia Changqing was by scouts. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. After the coalition soldiers could still encounter scattered whites at the beginning, the rest of the journey was smooth, until they were about to approach the location of the three-eyed crow. Xia Changqing had reason to believe that the Night King had already noticed their arrival, and he was also gathering his troops to prepare for a decisive battle with the coalition. After approaching Treehorn Mountain, the coalition finally discovered the hordes of whites. It was also under the guidance of the human coalition that the Night King was able to successfully find the location of the three-eyed crow. Xia Changqing certainly didn't know that he had accidentally become a guide, but even if he knew, he wouldn't change anything. If there was nothing to lead the Night King out, it would really not be an easy task to find the Night King in such a large place as the land of eternal winter. When enemies meet, they are particularly jealous. The fierce battle began. The coalition won by charging in an upright and orderly manner. After just a few rounds, they broke the formation of the whites. The whites won by appearing and disappearing, always catching the coalition off guard. But unfortunately, the soldiers of the coalition were all immortal. even if they were attacked by surprise, as long as they were not seriously injured, like having their heads chopped off, their actions would generally not be restricted. It was called a war, but in fact, in the eyes of Xia Changqing and others, it was just the ruthless killing of the whites by the human coalition. After realizing that the whites were no match for the human coalition, the steady Night King finally couldn't stand it anymore. He rode on the dead horse and slowly sacrificed himself with a dozen white walkers. Then the Night King showed the coalition what it meant to be a javelin champion, with precise strikes and one shot into the soul. The white walkers around him followed suit, throwing out ice spears one by one, and the coalition finally suffered casualties. It may also be the power of the cold god that was at work, and the immortality of the coalition soldiers was finally broken. Xia Changqing looked coldly and did not rush forward with winter in his hand. He still had confidence in dealing with ordinary white walkers, but he was still a little panicked if he had to deal with the Night King, the apostle of the god of cold. He was not afraid of the Night King, but he was a little afraid of the god of cold. He killed Melisande, which could attract the projection of the Lord of Light. You know, the Night King was much more important to the god of cold than Melisande was to the Lord of Light. Fortunately, the human coalition still had the human wave tactics. No matter how powerful the Night King's javelin throwing skills were, it was impossible for him to evolve the javelin into a Gatling. The Night King relied on the human wave tactics of the army of dead ghosts to conquer the continent of Westeros, but now he himself was going to be defeated by the human wave tactics of the human coalition. It must be said that this was a very ironic thing. The battle was finally over. As a coalition soldier stabbed the dragon crystal longsword into the body of the Night King, the battle was over. The Night King was blown into pieces of ice crystals, and the white walkers transformed from him also exploded with the Night King. After that, the army of dead ghosts lost the power to move and completely turned into corpses. The whole land of eternal winter was filled with happy cheers. Later, Xia Changqing led people to find the three-eyed raven and Bran in a cave. Even the Green Prophet had something he could not expect. Eddard took Bran away forcefully. The Night King had been destroyed, and Bran had no need to become the three-eyed raven. The three-eyed raven had never recovered from the development of this situation. The coalition forces began to withdraw from the land of eternal winter. The Night King had been destroyed, but the god of cold was an immortal god. The White Walkers might make a comeback in the future, but that had nothing to do with Xia Changqing. The human coalition returned to the north. Under Xia Changqing's consent, or his mandatory order, Westeros was no longer divided into countries. The parliament was composed of people from various families, just like the original imperial meeting. Important matters of the country were decided by the parliament. Chapter 57 Bloody Arena. The darkness dissipated before his eyes. Xia Changqing opened his eyes and looked at the world. The first thing that caught his eyes was a dirty and empty room that looked like a prison cell. Xia Changqing looked around and found that there was only one other man in the cell besides him. The man's face was full of frustration. He was naked from the waist, wearing only leather armor covering his lower body. The muscles on his body bulged and glowed with a bronze luster. This was a powerful warrior. This thought flashed through Xia Changqing's mind. As soon as he finished observing the surrounding situation, the system jumped out impatiently. Name: Xia Changqing. Current world: Spartacus. Selected mission: become a powerful warrior. Possessed skills: super perception, passive, return of the dead LV6, unusable, ice lance LV3, unusable, swordsmanship LV5, 23%, bow and arrow LV3, 51%, flame attachment LV2, 35%, shadow power LV1, 76. Xia Changqing covered his head with a headache. Spartacus is a person's name. In a world dominated by people's names, the protagonist is naturally Spartacus. The story of Spartacus takes place in the Roman Republic era. More than 70 years BC, China was under the rule of the Han dynasty. Spartacus was a slave and later became a gladiator, leading many slaves to resist the rule of Roman nobles. In short, this is the story. Xia Changqing looked at the system's task requirements again. There is no exact definition of growing into a powerful warrior, which makes him feel like he has nowhere to start. Moreover, his current situation seems to be a bit bad. Xia Changqing looked down at his current situation. Not only was he in a place that looked like a prison, but he was also wearing coarse linen clothes that were obviously worn by people of low status. Thinking of the era he was in, Xia Changqing was a little worried that he would not become a slave. Becoming a slave at the beginning, all actions depend on recklessness. At this moment, a huge cheer suddenly came from above Xia Changqing's head. The deafening cheer shook the wooden roof above Xia Changqing's head, and dust fell. Pa. Xia Changqing was covered in dust and looked quite embarrassed. He took the time to look at the man in the same cell. The other party still maintained the same expression as before, without any change. Hey, brother, what's your name? Xia Changqing took the initiative to ask, wanting to get some useful information from the other party. As soon as his words came out, they were automatically converted into a strange language. This is the advantage of the system. There is no need to worry about language barriers. What made Xia Changqing embarrassed was that the man did not pay attention to him. Instead, he noticed something and rushed to the iron railing and looked outside. Fortunately, there was no one else around, so no one noticed Xia Changqing's embarrassment. He touched his nose, did not talk again, and looked outside the railing. From a distance, Xia Changqing could see that the high platforms were densely packed with people, and countless people were cheering loudly and forgetting everything else. In the arena, a man wearing the same simple clothes as the man in the same cell as Xia Changqing, holding a sword in his hand, stood in the middle of the arena. The opponent of the strange man was a professional gladiator wearing tightly protected armor, holding a shield in his left hand and a sword in his right hand. This was a very unfair fight. Sure enough, after a few moves, the professional gladiator completely suppressed the asterisk man. Xia Changqing noticed that the man next to him had a nervous look in his eyes. Brother, do you know that man? He's going to lose. Xia Changqing tried to find a topic again and stated a fact in a flat tone. The strange man glared at Xia Changqing at first, and then his eyes turned into a trace of grief. Everyone's fate was the same, and no one could escape. In just a few words, the victory was decided in the arena. The professional gladiator won as expected. The blood was sprinkled on the mud of the arena. It was dazzling to the eyes, but it aroused even more enthusiastic cheers from the audience. What a barbaric era. Xia Changqing sighed in his heart. He thought of his current identity and thought that he might become a clown-like character for those people to watch. He felt uncomfortable. Damn system. Xia Changqing cursed in his heart. If you want to change the world, you can change it. Not only did you lose your equipment and weapons, but now you have become a servant. Although you can grow into a powerful warrior quickly in the battle with others, this is not the path Xia Changqing wants to choose. It's just that the situation is unclear now, and Xia Changqing doesn't want to cause trouble. At this moment, the iron bars of the cell were suddenly opened, and 2 Roman soldiers with weapons rushed in. They threw a sword directly to Xia Changqing's roommate. It's your turn. Hurry up. As he spoke, the irritable Roman soldier swung a whip in the air. With a sudden explosion, Xia Changqing looked at his roommate and clenched his fist unconsciously, but he did not make any resistance. Instead, he took the sword and walked into the arena as the other party said, "Hey." Xia Changqing just spoke, and a whip came at him. In a flash, Xia Changqing dodged the whip by turning sideways. The whip hit the ground and stirred up a cloud of dust. It can be seen that the other party did not have any intention of holding back. Boy, stay here honestly. It's not time for you to die yet. The man with the whip looked at Xia Changqing in surprise. He was very surprised that Xia Changqing could easily dodge the whip, but he did not care, but warned Xia Changqing civilly. The iron bars of the cage were closed again. Xia Changqing looked at the back of the Roman soldier and spat fiercely. If the whip had hit him, he would have been torn to pieces. However, Xia Changqing did not have the time to pay attention to other things. The battle in the arena was about to begin. What surprised Xia Changqing was that his unlucky roommate had offended someone. His opponent was not a gladiator, but 4 fully armed gladiators. He's dead now. Xia Changqing muttered to himself and could not help but mourn for this unlucky roommate he had just met. The equipment was originally very different, and now it was 4 against 1. How could he fight? In fact, it was not only Xia Changqing who thought so. Even the audience watching the gladiatorial competition around him did not buy it. For a while, boos were heard everywhere, making General Grabber, who personally led this scene in the stands, extremely embarrassed. Chapter 58 Welcome to Rome. Grabber was a nobleman of the Roman Republic. It stands to reason that he should not have any intersection with a person who has become a slave. However, in fact, the man who fought 1 against 4 in the arena, that is, Spartacus later, was captured by General Grabber and sent to the arena. The grudge between the two is also very simple. Spartacus is a Thracian, and he went to help General Grabber fight as a mercenary. But Grabber completely ignored the life and death of the Thracians. Not only did he use them as cannon fodder, but he also deducted them from food and clothes. The grumpy old brother Thracian quit on the spot. Not only did he not fight for the Romans, he also directly killed some Roman soldiers. Then these big men's thoughts were too simple. They didn't understand the principle of cutting the grass without removing the roots, and the spring breeze would grow again. So they went home like this. When General Grabber regrouped his men, he directly picked the Thracian tribe and arrested all the Thracians, including Spartacus. In the previous battle, many Thracians had died. Now it was Spartacus' turn. General Grabber was determined to kill him, so he arranged 4 fully armed gladiators. Of course, the audience around would not care about the grudges here. They just wanted to see the wonderful gladiatorial performance. However, it was obvious that this battle with a huge disparity in strength was not worth watching, so there was a lot of booing in the stands. The development of the matter was not as Xia Changqing expected. In just 2 moves, Spartacus was beaten to the ground in a mess. Facing the siege of 4 people, he had no power to fight back. He could only roll around on the ground in a mess to avoid the attacks. However, the 4 gladiators occupied 4 positions, and there was only a little space for Spartacus to avoid. How could he avoid all the attacks? In a moment, his body was covered with scars. The 4 gladiators were not in a hurry to kill him quickly. To put it bluntly, gladiators were people who used fighting for entertainment. In ancient Rome, no other form of entertainment could compare to gladiatorial performances. So the performance, of course, could not end too simply, but had to make the audience around happy. The 4 gladiators were like a cat playing with a mouse, teasing Spartacus on the ground, adding a wound to him from time to time. Just when Xia Changqing and the audience around him thought it was about to end, and Spartacus was doomed to die, something unexpected happened. After watching the red snake pattern on the gladiator's shield, Spartacus suddenly jumped up and killed the 4 gladiators cleanly. Xia Changqing was stunned. This could be reversed. I don't know whether Spartacus was too brave or the 4 gladiators were too useless, and he actually killed them. In the entire arena, after a brief silence, a huge cheer suddenly broke out. The audience didn't know Spartacus' name, so they could only shout desperately to vent their emotions. General Grabber looked at this scene with an ugly face. After Spartacus defeated 4 opponents, the audience cheered to spare him. In this case, even General Grabber had no reason to attack Spartacus again. Sitting behind General Grabber were 2 operators of the gladiator training ground, Batiatus and Soranus. The 2 were competitors, and the 4 gladiators killed on the field were provided by Soranus. Now seeing that his opponent had made such a big fool of himself, Batiatus was already very happy in his heart. He proposed to General Grabber to buy Spartacus. In the conversation just now, Batiatus had noticed General Grabber's strong desire to kill Spartacus. He proposed that it was very easy to kill a person in the gladiator training. In just a few words, the slave owners had already decided whether a person would stay or go, just as simple as buying and selling livestock. In the cage, Xia Changqing looked at Spartacus, who had returned victorious, and was sincerely happy for him. After the 1-on-4 fight just now, Xia Changqing had guessed that the man in front of him was most likely Spartacus himself. Spartacus, you did a good job. Xia Changqing gave a thumbs up, praised, and took the initiative to introduce himself. You can call me Xia, I'm from the east. Spartacus, who was able to survive after winning, looked at Xia Changqing with some doubts. The name Spartacus was given to him by Batista. Now that it came out of Xia Changqing's mouth, he was a little bit unresponsive. However, the joy of victory diluted other thoughts, so he didn't pay attention to Xia Changqing's address. Friend from the east, I wish you victory too. Before the two had time to exchange more greetings, Xia Changqing was driven out of the cage and came to the arena. Xia Changqing held the sword in his hand and waved it casually, adapting to the weight of the sword. He looked up and looked around. The audiences with different expressions were sitting in the layers. Under the gaze of so many people, it was inevitable that people would feel nervous. But Xia Changqing was also a person who had experienced big scenes. The battle with the White Walkers was even more nervous. Now this small scene could not make him nervous at all. After Xia Changqing appeared, General Grabber and others in the stands also noticed him. Who is the man who came out next? He doesn't look like a Thracian. Why is there one more person? The general's question was destined to be answered by no one, but he didn't delve into it. It was just a dying person, and it was not worth his attention. Because Elder Anubis had already spoken. Grabber, don't waste time, let someone deal with him. A moment later, Xia Changqing saw his opponent, who was only one person. Xia Changqing didn't feel offended. After all, it was always easier to deal with one person. The opponent held a shield and raised a sword. Without saying anything, he slashed at Xia Changqing with a sword. There was no intention of testing him. It was so simple and straightforward. Xia Changqing didn't know whether the opponent looked down on him or not. This attack was too careless, but he could understand it. One side had a shield and armor, and the other side had no shield and no armor. If they were still trembling and cautious, it would be too useless. Facing this sudden attack, Xia Changqing quickly thought of a countermeasure. The opponent's attack was heavy, but the speed was too slow. Xia Changqing even had time to make a sword flower before he raised his sword to block it. Dang. The two swords collided with each other. Xia Changqing's strength was not inferior to the opponent's at all, although he looked very thin and didn't even have bulging muscles on his body. The gladiator was clearly surprised. He didn't expect Xia Changqing's strength to be able to compete with him. But his rich combat experience didn't stop him from attacking. The gladiator's left hand shield suddenly hit Xia Changqing's head. Chapter 59 Buy one get one free gift. In the gladiator arena in Rome, the gladiatorial performance of executing the Thracians was supposed to have ended long ago, but now there was a small accident. A young man who appeared out of nowhere caught the last train of the gladiator. The nobles and free people sitting in the audience did not mind staying a little longer to see how this young man died tragically under the sword of the gladiator. The young man who suddenly appeared was Xia Changqing. Amid the deafening cheers around him, Xia Changqing dodged the gladiator's sword after sword with light steps. Bang! Another sword came, and Xia Changqing dodged it sideways. He had roughly grasped the opponent's attack mode and was working on counter-attacking. The gladiator's breathing under the mask became a little heavy. He had not killed this thin foreigner for such a long time, which made the gladiator a little impatient. He seemed to see the dissatisfied look of his master. Roar, the gladiator roared, holding the iron sword high and slashing at Xia Changqing. Xia Changqing shook his head secretly. The floor of this attack was too big. He ducked forward and rolled slightly and was already behind the opponent. Xia Changqing swung his sword backhand, and the blade slashed across the gladiator's unprotected heel, and most of his ankle was cut by this sword. The gladiator staggered forward 2 steps, and with a crack, his ankle broke directly, and the whole person fell to the ground. Screams rang out. The cheers of the surrounding audiences resounded through the sky. They liked to watch this kind of fight where the weak defeated the strong. Kill him. Kill him. Kill this rubbish. Cut off his head. All the audiences were howling like crazy. Under the influence of this crazy atmosphere, some ladies even tore their clothes directly. The headlights swayed wildly, and the people were dizzy. Xia Changqing's ears were filled with shouts of "kill him," which affected his emotions. He took his sword and walked to the fallen gladiator into steps. This was the fate of the gladiator, to dedicate his life and soul to this arena. Xia Changqing had no mercy. If he didn't kill the other party would kill him. This was an unsolvable fact. What he could do was to grab the gladiator's hair, hand over the sword, and cut the gladiator's throat with one sword, ending the other party's pain. Roar. After seeing Xia Changqing cut the gladiator's throat with one sword, all the audience cheered, as if they were in the High Court. Noble District. General Grabber was still a little confused. He still couldn't remember when he caught Xia Changqing. The other party seemed to have fallen from the sky and appeared so suddenly. Who is this person? The general couldn't help but ask a question from his soul. Graybo, don't worry about who he is. Now that the other side has won, this execution has become a joke. You messed it up. General Graybo's father-in-law, Anubis from the Senate, glared at his son-in-law fiercely. Originally, Anubis was somewhat dissatisfied with this son-in-law, and now it has further exacerbated the situation. Graybo's face was not good either. He had just spared Spartacus' life, and it was even more impossible for him to order the killing of Xia Changqing. His face changed, and General Graybo turned his head to look at Batiatus, the receiver. Boss Bay made eye contact with the general and blinked innocently. Batiatus, you should buy this person too, Graybo said in a stiff tone, with a sense of forced buying and selling. Batiatus frowned, and he took another look at Xia Changqing's thin appearance. Although Xia Changqing had just killed a gladiator, Boss Bay still did not think highly of Xia Changqing. Wouldn't it be a waste of money to buy such a slave? So Batiatus gave General Grabber a stiff smile, his tone full of bitterness and helplessness. General, I wonder how much you plan to sell this slave for. There was no other way. In order to please General Grabber, Batiatus had to puff up his face and bite the bullet. General Grabber glared at Boss Bay unhappily, and he snorted and stood up directly. This is free, I give it to you for free. Batiatus smiled. General, you are so generous. In the arena, Xia Changqing threw down the sword in his hand, looking very relaxed. Even when he was put back in the cage by the Roman soldiers, there was no drastic change in his mood. Xia Changqing pulled the shackles on his hands. These were put on him by the Roman soldiers after he was put back in the cage. Did he feel that he was too dangerous? Xia Changqing thought with mysterious confidence that it was not realistic to trap him with just these shackles. No one noticed that the shadow under Xia Changqing suddenly bulged a little, and this little shadow swam along his arm and into the keyhole on the shackles. Click. After a slight sound, the shackles under Xia Changqing's hands opened. Raising his eyebrows, Xia Changqing put on the shackles again. He was just experimenting just now. Now that he has confirmed that the power of shadow can open the shackles, he can be relieved. At least when he encounters danger, he can have some self-protection power. Then, Xia Changqing paid attention to Spartacus, who was lying dead. This hero who led the slave uprising as a gladiator was far from becoming a hero at this time. Xia Changqing sat cross-legged in the corner of the cage. Only at this time did he have time to think about it. If it goes as expected, he should join Spartacus in a gladiator training ground for training. Xia Changqing did not have any resistance to this. After all, the system's tasks were there. If he wanted to become stronger, necessary training was indispensable. Although the identity of a slave will make people helpless, and they will be forced to do things they don't want to do. Taking these circumstances into consideration, Xia Changqing positioned himself as neither outstanding nor too low-key, in the middle position, and mediocrity is enough. Moreover, with Spartacus around, even if he wanted to be high profile, he probably couldn't be high profile. After all, a protagonist who doesn't make trouble is not a good protagonist. Xia Changqing didn't wait too long in the cell, and a group of Roman soldiers came and escorted him and Spartacus, who was still lying dead, out of the Colosseum. Spartacus was seriously injured in the 1-on-4 process and is still unconscious. The two were thrown into a carriage and headed all the way to Capua. Batiatus's gladiator training ground was opened in Capua. Xia Changqing's gladiator career is about to begin. Chapter 60, Gladiator Training Ground. The gladiator training ground opened by Batiatus is located on the top of a mountain and covers a very large area. The side close to the cliff is surrounded by walls on 3 sides. The gladiators usually train in the open space here. If they want to go out, they can only pass through a narrow iron gate underground. This strict protection is to prevent the gladiators from rebelling or escaping privately. Outside the training ground is Batiatus's private mansion. When he is free, he always likes to stand on the 2nd floor and watch the gladiators training from a high position. After Xia Changqing was brought here, he was separated from Spartacus. Spartacus was injured, and he needed to be treated before he could join the training. Of course, Batiatus would not give him so much time. Xia Changqing was taken to a dungeon room alone. Before he could figure out what to do, a slave followed him in and quickly twisted Xia Changqing's long hair that he had kept in Westeros. In fact, after coming here, he had wanted to cut his hair short a long time ago because the weather in Rome was too hot. It was no wonder that the Romans he saw were all ragged and immoral. After the slaves left, he was the only one left in the cell. Xia Changqing licked his dry lips. Until now, he had not had a drop of water. However, judging from the current situation, it seems that no one cares about this first meal in the gladiator training ground. With a long sigh, Xia Changqing found a clean place, sat down against the wall, crossed his legs, and began to practice the power of shadow. Early the next morning, Xia Changqing was still asleep when he was picked up. A guard wearing armor and holding a sword woke him up and removed the shackles for Xia Changqing. Then, under the guard of the guard, Xia Changqing came to the training ground and formally met the other reserve gladiators. Batiatus brought 7 slaves. Xia Changqing even had the leisure to look at them. If they were counted by the time of enrollment, they would belong to the same class. However, to become a gladiator, one needs to undergo arduous training. It is unknown how many people will remain until the end. Everyone was dressed very similarly. There was no extra clothing on their bodies, only a loincloth wrapped around their waists. The 7 newcomers lined up and stood up to wait for the inspection of their master Batiatus. Opposite them, a group of muscular brothers were pointing at the 7 people with laughter. However, the newcomers stood there waiting for a long time. The sun gradually rose and the temperature rose. They were still in a state of no one caring about them. This was a show of force. Xia Changqing only had a thought in his mind and understood the intention of the training ground. The other party's target might only be Spartacus. They were just suffering from an unprovoked disaster. When the patience of the newcomers was about to run out, a black man wearing muscle armor came out with a whip. This man was the trainer of the gladiator training ground Batiatus. Docket's eyes were sharp, and he walked in front of the 7 newcomers with a dragon-like gait, and looked at each of them one by one. Some of them looked away, some were unruly, and some looked calm, and so on. "What's under your feet?" the trainer ordered the newcomers, saliva flying. The newcomers were forced by his momentum. No one dared to answer, and no one was willing to be the first to speak out. Xia Changqing curled his lips secretly. He knew what would happen next. Nothing more than the set of honor. A group of brainwashed people. What honor can they talk about? Things developed exactly as Xia Changqing expected. The newcomers told the truth. There was sand under their feet. Then Capua's champion Cress jumped out and said something inspiring, like throwing blood and sweat. However, the effect was minimal. Several newcomers who had not yet participated in the gladiator training were unmoved, which made Docket feel a little embarrassed. In the following time, Docket specifically looked for Spartacus's discomfort. There was no way. Spartacus had not yet recognized the reality and was still in a rebellious state. He was the so-called thorn. To deal with a thorn, you naturally cannot be merciful. Docket ordered Spartacus and Crescent to fight. The wooden training sword was thrown in front of Spartacus, but he was so rebellious that he disdained it. Docket whipped Spartacus with a whip. The rebellious Spartacus chose to fight hard, but unfortunately he was far from being the trainer's opponent. Then Spartacus said that he would not use the training sword to fight. Docket frowned at him for a while, and then threw Spartacus a gladiator sword. However, ideals are full, and reality is very skinny. Even if Spartacus used the iron sword, he was still no match for Cress. He was tortured to death by Cress. If Cress had not used a wooden training sword, Spartacus would have died countless times. Xia Changqing watched coldly. In his opinion, Spartacus's failure was doomed. Cress was in peak condition, while Spartacus was already injured. His fighting skills were far inferior to Cress. How could he be the opponent of the Capua champion? Spartacus was knocked to the ground. He couldn't accept that he was easily defeated. He couldn't figure it out in his heart. Once he couldn't figure it out, he was prone to impulsiveness, and once he was impulsive, he was prone to make mistakes. Spartacus looked at Cress, who was showing off his strength to the newcomers with his back to him. He got excited and picked up the iron sword and threw it at Cress. For a moment, everyone was shocked. No one expected that Spartacus would choose to sneak attack Cress. Even Xia Changqing didn't expect this scene. He only remembered the general story of Spartacus. He was not a god, so he certainly did not have such a good memory of what happened. You know, this is a sharpened iron sword. If Crescent cannot avoid this blow, he will be seriously injured if not dead. If Crescent is in trouble, Spartacus will definitely not survive. In a flash, Crescent has heard the sound of fierce wind coming from behind him. He quickly turned back and struck back, and luckily knocked away the iron sword that attacked him. The iron sword was knocked out, and the sword blade skillfully cut across the neck of a newcomer. The poor unlucky guy, without a sound, his neck was cut with a deep wound that could be seen to the bone, and he fell directly to the ground. Spartacus looked at this scene in amazement. He never expected that his sword not only did not achieve success, but instead killed an innocent ordinary person. Chapter 61 Training. Crescent, who had recovered from his shock, was instantly furious. He had almost died in Spartacus's hands just now. Crescent roared and rushed forward, pressing Spartacus under him. The death of a newcomer, except for Spartacus who felt a little guilty. Others were unmoved, and even laughed at Spartacus's stupid behavior. Your stupid behavior has wasted a life. Docket looked down at Spartacus's unruly eyes. But your life can be redeemed. Extend 2 fingers to show surrender, and ask for forgiveness from the host of the competition. Under the gaze of everyone, Spartacus clenched his fists, with no intention of admitting defeat. Smash his head, Docket said lightly. Crescent couldn't wait to do it. He raised his sword high and smashed it on Spartacus' head. Crescent. At this time, Batiatus stopped him. Since the master had spoken, no one present could disobey his order. Spartacus was able to return to the team, but the poor unfortunate guy was dragged down by the guards and thrown to an unknown place. Thank the kind master. Docket looked at Spartacus and said coldly, then he glanced around. Let's start training now. Do you see those wooden pillars? Each of you has one. Carry them up for me. 7, no, 6 newcomers looked at the place where the wooden pillars were placed. These wooden pillars were not small, and each weighed about 60 to 70 kilograms. Snap. The sound of whips suddenly exploded in the air. Docket whipped the empty space with a whip, which caused great psychological pressure on the newcomers. No one dared to hesitate under Docket's whip, not even Spartacus. Xia Changqing walked in the middle of the team, and he did not blink an eye. In fact, with Spartacus present, the others were just passers-by, and were not taken seriously by others. Even Xia Changqing killed a gladiator in the arena by himself. No one in the entire training ground was optimistic about this thin foreigner. Yes, Xia Changqing looked like an exotic person. In the eyes of others, he was a foreigner. The first few hours were spent by the newcomers carrying wood. Time had slowly come to noon. The sun was scorching. Just standing under the sun made people feel dry and thirsty, not to mention the high intensity training. Xia Changqing almost couldn't hold on. Fortunately, he had the help of the system. The swordsmanship he learned from Westeros also indirectly enhanced his physical fitness. At this time in the training, he could clearly feel that he was getting stronger little by little. Although the attributes such as physique and strength were not materialized in the system, the process of physical strengthening still made him happy. Finally, after the sunset, Docket announced the order to end the training. The old people who had become gladiators rushed to the place to eat, and some of the newcomers who had just received training could not bear this level of training. They were so tired that they lay down on the ground and didn't even want to move a finger. Xia Changqing followed the old man and got his lunch from an old man with a broken arm. The mush that looked like snot made people feel sick just by looking at it. However, Xia Changqing was not so hypocritical as not to eat. In this kind of training, if he didn't eat, even with the help of the system, he would definitely not be able to hold on for long. What was even more infuriating was that even the old man with a broken arm, who was responsible for serving food, enjoyed bullying the newcomers. Less than half a spoonful of mush was poured into the bowl, and the old man smiled viciously. Get out. Get out of here. Even Xia Changqing, who always had a good temper, couldn't help but spit out foul language in his heart. He really didn't treat the newcomers as human beings. Xia Changqing didn't say anything harsh. It was useless to say harsh words in this kind of place. If there was a chance in the future, he would let the other party pay it back. He held the bowl, picked up a piece of hard bread, found an empty table, and sat down. Xia Changqing stared at the food in the bowl with empty eyes, and he persuaded himself to eat it quickly. When the food was hard to swallow, Xia Changqing suddenly felt that the top of his head became dark. He raised his head and looked at the person who came. Spartacus sat opposite Xia Changqing with a bowl in his hand. "You are from the east?" Spartacus took the initiative to talk because Xia Changqing, like him, had fought his way out of the arena, so Spartacus had a special feeling for this young man with an exotic face. Xia Changqing was also surprised that Spartacus would take the initiative to talk to him. "Yes, I'm from a country called Han in the east." Xia Changqing spoke without hesitation. "Why did you come to Rome?" Spartacus seemed to be very interested in Xia Changqing. Xia Changqing looked up at Spartacus and casually said the reason he had just made up. "I wanted to see what Rome was like, so I went all the way west. I didn't expect that. After arriving in Rome, the Romans arrested me on the grounds that I had no citizenship. That's really unfortunate." After a while, Spartacus managed to say this. "What are you talking about?" Just then, a man with golden curly hair sat down next to Xia Changqing. "Friend, where are you from? It's rare to see someone with your face." The blonde curly hair seemed to be very talkative. "Xia, from the east." Xia Changqing shrugged and helplessly explained his origins again. "Vero." The blonde curly hair introduced himself. After listening to Xia Changqing's origins, he felt very unfortunate for Xia Changqing. "Rome is not a good place," he said. So it can be seen that Vero is more interested in Spartacus, but Xia Changqing doesn't mind building a good relationship with the two. In a place like the gladiator training ground, only by gathering together for warmth can you avoid being bullied too harshly by the old people. After a simple conversation, the three of them officially met. After a short lunch break, training continued in the afternoon. In addition to resisting wood, they also received sprint training, mobile training, and one-on-one confrontation training. All the time was packed, leaving no time for rest. It was not until the sun went down and everyone was almost exhausted that Doc had announced the order to end the training. Then it was time for dinner. Xia Changqing could already feel the pain in his muscles all over his body. At this time, he really wanted to take a bath and have a good rest. It was a pity that in Capua, a shabby place, even slave owners like Batiatus could not take a bath, let alone these low-status slave gladiators. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62. The assessment is coming. What made Xia Changqing feel most uncomfortable was the time to take a shower after dinner. Batiatus didn't provide them with much water, and they couldn't even wipe their bodies. A group of muscular men, naked in a room, compared their lengths, and were suddenly filled with a philosophical atmosphere. When Xia Changqing thought about the days ahead, he didn't know how long he would have to live like this, and he felt uncomfortable. After hastily finishing the shower session, the 6 newcomers gathered in a cell. They didn't even have a decent room, and could only be locked up in a cage like prisoners. Only by becoming a formal gladiator, and being able to achieve good results, and earn money for Batiatus, can they improve their living environment. After a day of hard training, the newcomers who had not yet fully adapted were all exhausted. They returned to the cell, and lay down against the wall, not wanting to move at all. However, Doc had no intention of letting them go. The trainer walked into the cell, and said in a cold voice, "Get up, you can sleep only after you prove that you are all men." The 6 newcomers were full of complaints in their hearts, but no one dared to say it out loud. People under the eaves have to bow their heads. Each of the 6 people carried a piece of wood, formed a circle, and began to walk. If anyone was a little slower, Dockert's whip would swing over mercilessly. This walk lasted all night. After the old gladiators got up and came out, Dockert let a few newcomers go. The old people watched all this with a smile, as if seeing the newcomers being tortured was their only pleasure. And the training of the day continued. This kind of day seemed to have no end, and every day there was nothing but training. A lot of training will leave people no time to think, which is why gladiators are easily brainwashed. Spartacus was no longer like a powder keg that would explode at any time. The cunning Basiatus found Spartacus' weakness. He used the excuse of finding Spartacus' wife to appease Spartacus and let the training ground calm down. However, only Xia Changqing knew that this was destined to end in tragedy. Basiatus would not be so kind. The day Spartacus' wife was found would be the day of his death. Xia Changqing was powerless to save this matter. Could he still tell Spartacus not to let Basiatus find his wife? If he really said so, the first person to turn his face would be Spartacus himself. Training, training, and training. Xia Changqing seemed to be obsessed with the feeling of feeling that he could feel himself getting stronger every day. Gradually, he also forgot about Spartacus. In fact, there are many types of gladiators, that is, different professions. Sword fighters, shield fighters, axe fighters, and net fighters. However, in this small gladiator training ground run by Basiatus, there is no detailed classification at all. Most gladiators have a shield in one hand and a sword in the other. In the entire training ground, there is only one net fighter. To become a formal gladiator, the newcomers have to pass a trial. Only by passing the trial can they be qualified to continue living here. The content of the trial is also very simple. It is designated by docket. The newcomers and the old ones fight one-on-one, as long as they can satisfy the master Basiatus. And the loser, if not killed in the battle, the only fate is to be sold to the mine. The training time is fast and short, and a month has passed in a flash. This day, it is finally time to test the training results of the newcomers. In the afternoon, a narrow high platform has been built on the open space where the gladiators train daily. The newcomers did not train all afternoon. They had to conserve their energy for the upcoming trial in the evening. The newcomers are inevitably nervous about the moment that will decide their stay or even life and death. Of the 6 newcomers, the only one who seemed confident was Spartacus. Perhaps it was his wife's token that gave him faith. In daily training, Spartacus stood out and was very conspicuous. Xia Changqing, who had fought his way out of the arena like Spartacus, seemed much more mediocre and did not attract too much attention from others. This was also intentional by Xia Changqing. His purpose in the training ground was to train his body. Compared with his original thin appearance, Xia Changqing now had bulging muscles. Although he did not look particularly strong, his explosive power was amazing. However, his overall body shape was still strong, and his appearance was far inferior to that of Spartacus and Chris. The increase in strength also brought about an increase in speed. Xia Changqing's swordsmanship also improved a lot. In addition, his elusive shadow power could play an unexpected role at critical moments. In the entire training ground, even the trainer docket might not be Xia Changqing's opponent now. A life of cheating does not need explanation. Soon the night fell. Braziers were lit around the training grounds, and everyone gathered around the high platform. The old men talked to each other, looking relaxed. The 6 newcomers gathered together, looking a little solemn. Not long after, Basiatus and his wife appeared on the balcony on the 2nd floor, with 2 slave girls behind them gently waving fans. Basiatus raised his chin and signaled docket to start. Docket glanced at the newcomers with different expressions, gave them a look of wishing them all the best, and then announced the start of the battle. Whether it was a newcomer or an old man, the equipment they got was the same, a sword and a shield. However, the sword was a competitive sword with a sharp blade, and the shield was an iron shield with a sharp edge. This was also the reason why the newcomers were likely to die in the trial if they were not careful. Basiatus was a cold-blooded slave owner, and what he needed was a gladiator who could make money for him, not a waste. The trial was cruel, and it was time to decide people's fate. Vero. Docket shouted, and the golden curly-haired Vero was honored to be chosen to be the first to appear. Vero took a deep breath and climbed up the platform under the cheering eyes of Spartacus and Xia Changqing. He picked up the dagger and shield on the platform and took a defensive posture. Docket nodded with satisfaction. Among this group of newcomers, in addition to Spartacus, Vero was the one he was most optimistic about. When facing an opponent who is stronger than oneself, defense is the best choice. A rash attack means exposing one's own flaws, which will give the opponent an opportunity to take advantage. Chapter 63. It's my turn. Vero was lucky. The opponent assigned to him by Dockett was not a brilliant figure among the old gladiators. He chose to treat it with caution and did not attack rashly. The other party's character was also stable. After testing each other, the two finally fought each other. But even a mediocre gladiator was not something Vero could beat now. The other party's fighting experience was indeed much stronger than Vero. Vero tried his best, but in the end he only tied with the opponent. However, as long as the master Batiatus was satisfied, he announced loudly that Vero had passed the test. The good start made the newcomer's uneasy mood calm down a little. The newcomer who came on the field next was a passerby who did not deserve to have a name. His opponent was Barca, who was second only to Crescent in the entire training ground. Barca was a Carthaginian. He killed his father in the arena and survived. However, after becoming a gladiator, he was proud of it, as if he had forgotten his father's hatred. Barca, who had long and beautiful hair, was known as the Beast of Carthage. In just one round, he cut off the neck of passerby. Such a clean victory made the old people burst into a fierce cheer. Then, Dockett shouted, "Oriental boy, it's your turn." He scanned the old people, looking at the old people who were eager to try, and finally set his sights on Nias. "Nias, you go." Nias, who had well-developed limbs and a simple mind, immediately showed a grim smile at the corner of his mouth. He was tall, and was a head taller than Xia Changqing. This gap made Nias look at Xia Changqing with contempt. Nias was the only net fighter in this training ground. His strength was enough to rank in the top 5 in the entire training ground. So although he was a net fighter, it didn't mean that he couldn't use the dagger well. In Xia Changqing's opinion, Nias is actually very easy to deal with. He is not good at thinking, and can only use brute force to fight the enemy. As long as he cannot attack for a long time, he will become impatient and reveal his flaws. With the cheering eyes of Vero and Spartacus, Xia Changqing climbed up the platform, picked up the blood-stained dagger and shield, and looked at Nias in a defensive posture. Facing Xia Changqing in a defensive posture, Nias raised his shield to his chest, smiled contemptuously, and began to run towards Xia Changqing. Like a wild bull, he wanted to break through Xia Changqing's defense in one fell swoop. With the thin body of the Oriental boy, he would definitely not be his opponent in a head-on collision. Nias thought so. Xia Changqing narrowed his eyes. He had already noticed Nias's intention. This clearly showed that he wanted to use his physical advantage to suppress him. The built platform was originally very narrow, and Nias's tall body would occupy half of the space, leaving little space for Xia Changqing to move. Xia Changqing moved his wrist. In this trial, he had to show some strength to pave the way for defeating his opponent in the arena in the future. After such a long time in the training ground, Xia Changqing's strength has also been greatly improved. He should show some of his strength appropriately to improve his life, and then persuade Spartacus to fight back at the right time. He didn't want to live this kind of slave life for a long time. After making up his mind, Xia Changqing bent his elbow, clenched his shield, and rushed towards Nias. Bang! The two of them collided fiercely. Xia Changqing took 2 steps back. His left hand was slightly numb. In the competition of strength, he was indeed not Nias's opponent. However, Xia Changqing's head-on performance directly shocked everyone. The Oriental boy has great strength, Dockett thought secretly, and he suddenly felt that he had misjudged him. On the stage, after the two collided, Xia Changqing immediately stabilized his body. He did not hesitate, and raised his sword to stab Nias, who was still a little stunned. However, as an experienced gladiator, Nias's body had already formed a fighting instinct. When Xia Changqing stabbed at him with a sword, he subconsciously raised his shield to block the sword. Xia Changqing secretly said it was a pity. The competitive sword in his hand was too short compared to the sword he used in Westeros. On the other side, Nias had reacted and counterattacked Xia Changqing. The two men moved around on the high platform, attacking each other back and forth. The entire training ground was silent. Before the assessment began, no matter whether they were new or old, no one paid much attention to Xia Changqing, a thin Oriental man. But now Xia Changqing gave them a big surprise. After a long time of attacking Xia Changqing, Nias became a little irritable. His movements became more and more violent. Xia Changqing just responded calmly and dragged the battle into a time of endurance competition. Beatius watched this scene with interest. He admitted that this Oriental boy gave him a lot of surprises. Seeing that the battle was deadlocked, Beatius raised his chin towards Docket. The trainer quickly understood what his master meant. He shouted to the two people on the stage, "Stop, that's enough." Xia Changqing took a step back and put away the sword in his hand. It was enough to do this now. At least it gave others an impression that he was very strong. I just don't know if Nias was immersed in the battle. When Docket asked them to stop, he didn't stop as he said. Instead, he took advantage of Xia Changqing's withdrawal and quickly attacked. Docket was instantly furious. He shouted loudly, "Nias!" However, Xia Changqing was not a person who would sit and wait for death. He quickly turned sideways and dodged to the side. At the same time, his shield hit the side of Nias's sword hard. Nias lost his balance instantly. Xia Changqing was not willing to give him any more. He kicked Nias in the thigh. The big fool fell from the platform like a cannonball and then hit the ground hard. "Enough. I declare the Oriental boy qualified." Docket roared angrily. He hated the presence of gladiators who disobeyed his orders. In fact, the battle was over. Nias lay on the ground with his back to the sky, looking at the sky with empty eyes. He was going to become a laughing stock among the gladiators. He couldn't even beat the skinny Oriental boy. Nias was heartbroken. Others didn't care how Nias felt. They, the gladiators, might fight each other in the arena at any time. So although they were in the same training ground, they were enemies to each other. When Xia Changqing jumped down from the platform, Docket stared into his eyes and frowned slightly. "Oriental boy, your name is Xia, right?" He tapped Xia Changqing's chest. "Boy, I'll remember you." Chapter 64, Sweet Confidence. Docket had rich combat experience. He had seen through Xia Changqing's method of hiding his strength, which made him a little unhappy. Docket believed that gladiator was a very sacred profession, and he would not tolerate others to blaspheme gladiators. However, Beatius did not show any displeasure. He did not care whether Xia Changqing deliberately concealed his strength or not, as long as this Oriental boy could make money for him. The assessment did not stop because of Xia Changqing's sudden rise. After Xia Changqing, it was Spartacus' turn. His opponent was the #1 gladiator, Crescent. Spartacus smiled confidently. He thought Crescent was not his opponent, so he smiled confidently at Xia Changqing and Vero, and could not wait to climb onto the platform. However, things did not develop as Spartacus expected. He was on the stage, and after a few moves, Crescent knocked down all his swords and shields, and was at a disadvantage. Finally, it was because Chryse accidentally stepped on the cloth belt that Spartacus' wife left for him that Spartacus found an opportunity. He pulled the cloth belt and made Chryse unstable and fell off the platform. In any case, even if Spartacus took advantage of it, it was a fact that Chryse fell off the platform and Spartacus naturally won. The assessment of the 6 newcomers was soon over. A total of 4 of the 6 people passed the assessment. In addition to Xia Changqing and the other 3, there was also a fool who had words engraved on his forehead who passed the assessment. The other 2 all died in the assessment, which shows the cruelty of the gladiators. However, this is just the beginning. After becoming formal gladiators, they need to prepare to participate in the gladiator show. Many people will die in every gladiator show. If there are no deaths in a gladiator show, the audience will definitely not be satisfied. But that is all for the future. Now the 4 people who have passed the assessment have to brand their arms with the letter B representing the Beatius family and then take the oath. Xia Changqing rejected this mark of slavery, but now was not the time to rebel, so he could only endure it. Hiss. When the red-hot iron pressed on his elbow, Xia Changqing gasped in pain, clenched his teeth, and kept cursing Beatius in his heart. Ganlen's mother. Sooner or later, I will kill you, old man, with my own hands. For a cold-blooded slave owner like Beatius, killing him with a sword is the best way. After the 4 people took the oath, Beatius encouraged the 4 people and drew a big cake for them. As long as you can bring money and glory to the Beatius family, then I will definitely not be stingy. Whether it is money or women, I will satisfy you. Come on, my warriors. Only the Iron Fool would believe Beatius' words. However, there are too many brainwashed gladiators. Even Spartacus now has illusions about Batiatus, and he still relies on Batiatus to help him find his wife. Xia Changqing looked around blankly. There was no one around who shared the same ideals with him. The road to uprising was still long and arduous. This damn slave life. After becoming a formal gladiator, he trained every day as usual. The daily life of a gladiator was training, training, and training again. Only by training more in peacetime and going to the arena could he increase the possibility of victory. Not long after, Spartacus began to mutter that he wanted to fight in the arena earlier. Only by participating in gladiatorial performances could he make money, and Spartacus would have the opportunity to redeem himself and his wife and live a free life. Xia Changqing did not expose his unrealistic idea now. With Batiatus's character, it was impossible for him to really let any gladiator go free. The battle that Spartacus had been looking forward to earnestly finally ushered in the dawn. In a few days, it was the Forged God Festival, which was a day to pray to the god of fire Hephaestus. The Archon of Capua planned to hold a gladiatorial competition. This matter was assigned to Batiatus. After all, in the small city of Capua, Boss Bay and Boss So were the only two people who ran a relatively large gladiator training ground. The administrator had a better relationship with Soranus, so this tough job fell on Batiatus. Batiatus and Soranus were mortal enemies, and the two were competitors. In addition, Batiatus was heavily in debt during this period, and debt collectors came to his door every day to collect debts. He urgently needed a victory to get some money. So Batiatus planned to send 20 gladiators to participate in this gladiatorial competition, and then select 2 brave generals as the finale. One of the brave generals, as expected, fell on the head of Crescent, and no one was more suitable to be the brave general than the champion of Capua. The candidate for the other brave general was tentatively determined, and Master Batiatus had to consider it. Spartacus thought his chance had come. As long as he became a brave general and defeated Crescent in the gladiatorial competition, he would be able to become famous and get more money. Spartacus was so eager to be free with his wife that he lost his mind. He would not listen to any advice and wanted to become a brave general. However, in Dockett's opinion, Spartacus was still too young. If he really went to the arena, he would definitely not be a match for Crescent. Moreover, there was no tradition that a newcomer could become a brave general in the first battle. Spartacus was not even considered by Batiatus and Dockett. Spartacus, don't act on impulse. You are not a match for Crescent yet. If you confront him rashly, you will suffer in the end. As a friend, Xia Changqing felt that he had an obligation to remind Spartacus. Although Spartacus was very confident, Xia Changqing could see that he was no match for Crescent. In terms of combat experience, Crescent was far better than him. Xia, have you forgotten? During the assessment, I defeated Chris myself. I'm much better now than I was then. Chris is even less likely to be my opponent. Spartacus's confidence came from nowhere. He believed that he could defeat Chris. It was really hard to persuade the damned ghost. Xia Changqing had no choice but to pray that Spartacus's protagonist halo would take effect and survive the gladiatorial contest. When the time came to the competition, Dockett announced the list of 20 gladiators. Chris was a brave general, fighting against another brave general Nias. Spartacus was fighting against Vero, and it was the first match for the two of them. Only the weakest people would be arranged to play first. Chapter 65 The seeds of resistance have been planted. Xia Changqing's name was prominently listed on the battle list. The unlucky guy who fought against him was the Iron Fool with words carved on his forehead. The 4 newcomers who had just become official gladiators were lucky enough to contract the first and second games of the opening match. Xia Changqing cast a look at that man, and the other's eyes slightly dodged, not daring to look at Xia Changqing. Shaking his head, Xia Changqing ignored him and came to Spartacus and Vero. I want to fight for the position of brave general. Spartacus clenched his fists and still hadn't given up the idea of fighting with Crescent. Xia, Vero, you two have to help me think of a way. If Vero and I fight, no matter who lives or dies, it is something we don't want to see. Spartacus' words were not wrong. In this gladiator training ground, Xia Changqing had a better relationship with the two of them, and he certainly didn't want any of them to get into trouble. Xia Changqing glanced at Nias, who was full of joy. Spartacus wanted to fight against Crescent, and the first thing to do was to deal with this big fool. It was because Gnaeus was a big fool that he was the easiest person to deal with. The next day, in the training ground, everyone was doing the final training before the competition. Gnaeus, who was selected as a brave general, was under a lot of pressure. He was swinging his fishing net over and over again. "Spartacus, go, your chance has come," Xia Changqing whispered to Spartacus. Docket was not here at this time, which was the best opportunity to anger Gnaeus. Spartacus' eyes became firm after hearing this. He walked forward and angered Gnaeus in a few words. "Iron fool is iron fool." Gnaeus was like an angry bull, and he pounced on Spartacus fiercely. Spartacus, who deliberately angered Gnaeus, had already made preparations. He flexibly dodged to the side, and the big fool hit the wooden pillar without any deceleration. Xia Changqing took a breath of cold air. He watched Gnaeus vomit blood and faint. Just by watching, he felt that it would hurt a lot. Vero and Xia Changqing looked at each other. Both of them had a speechless expression. They knew that Gnaeus was simple-minded, but they didn't expect him to be so stubborn. At this moment, Docket, who heard the noise, came out. Spartacus hesitated for a moment and explained first. Gnaeus was mad because of the sun. He rushed over like a mad goat. Vero on the other side immediately joined in. "I noticed his eyes, burning with madness and hunger." Docket's eyes turned, and Xia Changqing nodded affirmatively. The matter was left unresolved. Gnaeus was carried into rest. This time, he had lost the opportunity to become a brave general and participate in the competition. Docket and Batiatus had to choose a new brave general, so Spartacus's opportunity came. The competition was about to start, and Batiatus planned to hold a pre-match banquet in his home, inviting the nobles of Capua to come, so that they could watch their gladiators in advance and place bets on them. Therefore, before the banquet was held that night, the gladiators were asked to wash up and go to the front hall, where they would stand for a group of nobles with hateful faces to admire and play with. "Fuck," Xia Changqing cursed angrily, not hiding his disgust for this matter at all. Vero glanced at him. "Xia, this kind of thing doesn't happen in your east." "Fuck," Xia Changqing cursed again. "I will kill those nobles sooner or later. Keep your voice down, Orientals." Vero's face changed drastically, and he whispered, "Xia, do you want to kill us all?" Xia Changqing didn't say anything else. He turned his head and glanced at Vero. Vero sold himself as a slave because he owed money. His purpose of becoming a gladiator was also very simple, which was to make enough money. The idea of resistance was not in Vero's heart at all, so Xia Changqing didn't want to say anything more to Vero. On the contrary, Spartacus's expression did not change at all after hearing the conversation between the two. There was always a seed of resistance in his heart. Without further ado, a group of gladiators were cleaned up and entered the front hall under the guard of the guards. This was the first time in such a long time that Xia Changqing walked out of the training ground in the back mountain and came to the front hall. In the front hall, the nobles stood together in 2s and 3s, commenting on the gladiators who came in. The noble women who were originally ladies at home directly took action against the gladiators. The strong bodies and bulging muscles of the gladiators were the most attractive to these noble ladies. Xia Changqing's eyes were not on the noble ladies, who were wearing thin clothes. He stared at a long sword hanging on the wall. The shape was very different from that of the Roman sword, and the special words engraved on it made Xia Changqing recognize it at a glance. This was his Valyrian steel sword Winter. He thought that he didn't bring anything with him when he changed the world. It turned out that Winter was taken away by Batiatus. After attracting his gaze, Xia Changqing stood there without looking around, trying to ignore the ladies coming and going. Otherwise he would not be able to help but crush their heads. The most distressed one was Spartacus. In the Roman arena, he became famous in one battle, and the ladies were all interested in this Thracian. Xia Changqing took the initiative to let go of his perception. He vaguely heard Batiatus and Docket discussing the matter of letting Spartacus serve as a general. "Spartacus, you have a chance to serve as a general," Xia Changqing whispered to Spartacus, and before he cast a puzzled look, Xia Changqing continued, "Well, it's over. Docket doesn't agree that you can serve as a general." "Xia, are you making fun of me?" Spartacus only complained once and stopped talking because the hostess Lydia and General Grabber's wife Elisha came to him together. After seeing Spartacus, Elisha's face showed obvious displeasure because Spartacus had a grudge against General Grabber, so Elisha also disliked Spartacus. The atmosphere on the field was a little stiff for a while, and Elisha proposed to leave here on the spot. There was nothing in this banquet that could attract her. But Lydia had finally invited the general's wife, the daughter of the elder, to come, so how could she let her leave easily? You, follow me. The hostess pointed at Vero casually, motioning him to follow. Vero was confused and couldn't help but look at Xia Changqing and Spartacus. The two of them gave Vero a look that wished him well. Chapter 66, Attack of Spartacus. As the hostess Lydia took Vero away, a large number of nobles in the front hall followed suit. Spartacus, what do you think Lydia did with Vero? Xia Changqing smiled. The nobles of this period in Rome were all very good at having fun. Especially the strong gladiators like Vero, who were the most popular with those noble ladies. It's a pity that Spartacus is still thinking about how to become a brave general, and he doesn't want to pay attention to Xia Changqing's jokes. Boring. Xia Changqing muttered softly. He let go of his perception and heard a blushing and heart-beating voice from Vero who had already left. This made Xia Changqing's face look ugly. Vero was a person, not a toy for them to display. These nobles actually used this as a joke. There was simply no limit. When Vero returned to the team, his body was already soaked with sweat. Vero, are you okay? Xia Changqing cast a concerned look. If such a thing happened to him, he would definitely not be able to bear it, and might even go berserk on the spot. Vero panted slightly. He felt really bad to be forced to do such a thing, and under the watch of a group of nobles. He cast a grateful look at Xia Changqing, then turned to Spartacus and said, Dr. Batiatus are discussing the selection of the general, but unfortunately the candidate is not you. After hearing this, Spartacus showed a thoughtful expression. Seeing that his meaning had been conveyed, Vero relaxed a little. He looked at Xia Changqing and smiled bitterly. This is our fate as gladiators. We can only accept it. Why can we only accept it? Vero, have you ever thought about resisting? Vero's face was bitter. Xia, you know me. The purpose of my becoming a gladiator is to pay off my debts. This is something I did voluntarily. How could I possibly resist? Xia Changqing, Vero, have you ever thought that as a gladiator you have no control over your own destiny? You are about to face your first battle. If you die in the arena, you still won't get a penny. Then live desperately and win one victory after another. Looking at Vero's expression, Xia Changqing stopped the topic and planted some seeds in his heart first. There was no need to go too far and cause Vero's disgust. Everyone, please be quiet. When the dinner was about to end, Batiatus stood up and introduced the brave generals who would appear tomorrow to the nobles of Capua. The unbeatable champion of Capua, Crescent. Batiatus introduced in an excited tone, causing cheers from the nobles. Just as he was about to introduce the next brave general, an accident happened. Spartacus suddenly rushed out of the team. He suddenly pounced on Crescent from behind, rode on him, and swung his fist. There was an uproar in the front hall. Crescent had already entangled with Spartacus, and a fierce hand-to-hand fight was staged temporarily. This naked slap in the face made Batiatus and Docet angry, but the nobles liked to watch this kind of scene, especially Elisha. Her eyes were shining, and the fist-to-flesh fight between the two gladiators made her heart surge. But Batiatus would not sit idly by and watch the two people entangled together, which really damaged the reputation of the Batiatus family. However, Spartacus's behavior was also putting Batiatus on the fire. If he announced that the general to fight tomorrow was not Spartacus, the nobles would definitely not buy it. In the end, Batiatus had no choice but to announce that another general would fight tomorrow, that is, Spartacus. At this point, the nobles left with satisfaction and were looking forward to tomorrow's gladiatorial competition. Batiatus forced a smile and sent all the nobles away, then turned around and angrily ordered the gladiators to be locked up in the underground cell. Xia Changqing leaned against the cold wall, which made his back feel a little comfortable. The weather in Capua was really hot, and even at night, it was still irritating. Now they are still the 4 new gladiators in a cell. Spartacus is satisfied to become a general, his face is full of smiles, and his hands have been playing with the cloth belt he originally gave to his wife. Spartacus, don't be happy too early. There is no false reputation under a great name. If you look down on Crescent, I guarantee that you will lose miserably. Xia Changqing looked at the complacent Spartacus and couldn't help but pour a basin of cold water on him. Crescent has been famous in Capua for such a long time, and he has real skills under his command. It can be seen from the usual training that Spartacus underestimated the enemy too much. Don't worry, Xia. Spartacus was full of confidence. Have you forgotten? During the assessment, if Batiatus hadn't stopped me, I would have chopped off his head long ago. Since I can defeat him once, I can defeat him a second time. Xia Changqing closed his eyes and stopped persuading. A stubborn person like Spartacus would not listen to others' persuasion before he suffered a loss. Only when he was ruthlessly defeated by Crescent, he could realize his shortcomings. However, Xia Changqing was not sure whether Spartacus would die directly in the arena at that time. But even if Spartacus died at the hands of Crescent, it would not delay Xia Changqing's own plan. After he won some victories in the arena and honed his martial arts, he would leave the gladiator training ground even without Spartacus. Wanting to persuade Spartacus, Vero and others was just to find some helpers. Moreover, Xia Changqing still regarded Spartacus and Vero as friends in his heart. Although he was just a passerby in this world, he still wanted to help them if he could. But Spartacus was too keen on committing suicide and was still a stubborn person. Xia Changqing couldn't persuade him at all. The short night passed quickly. Before dawn, Doc had brought the guards to wake up the gladiators who needed to participate. They got on the carriages in batches and headed to the Capua arena. Some people will become famous today, and some may die today. Expectation, excitement, confusion. The gladiators have different thoughts. However, the wheels of the carriage would not stop turning. Before the sun rose, all the gladiators arrived at the arena. It was still the familiar cell, the familiar open field. After dozens of days away, Xia Changqing once again set foot in the bloody arena. Chapter 67, An Easy Victory. The Festival of the God of Forges is a very important festival for the Roman people, and on such a festival, nothing is more appropriate than watching a gladiatorial performance. Sacrificing blood and life to the gods will make the gods happy. On such an important day, the administrator of Capua will also be present, and the audience seats around the arena are even more crowded. Batiatus sat in the noble seat, his face full of pain. So many spectators came to watch the game, but he couldn't get a penny from it, and he had to consume the lives of his own gladiators. His annoyance can be imagined. However, when the consul arrived, Batiatus immediately put on a flattering smile. After the crowd was overcrowded, Batiatus forced a smile and announced the start of the gladiatorial competition. There were a total of 10 gladiatorial competitions. Xia Changqing and Vero, who had just become newcomers, were arranged at the front. Compared with Xia Changqing, Vero had to deal with a gladiator with some competition experience. And Vero was still in the first game, which made him a little nervous. Before the game started, Vero closed his eyes and prayed to the gods in the sky for victory. After praying, Vero put on an iron helmet, which was tightly protected, leaving only a fine net in front of the eyes, so that the gladiator could see the surrounding scene clearly. In addition, Vero was equipped with a large rectangular shield. As long as he slightly reduced his body, he could hide his entire body behind the shield. But Vero was not wearing armor, but was naked. After all, the audience liked to watch the blood-splattered scene. Vero came on the court. As a newcomer, he had no fame, and so did Vero's opponent. So the two gladiators who came out in the first game did not cause any waves. What the audience wanted to see was the century showdown between Spartacus and Crescent, not the chickens pecking each other. Even so, the gladiatorial competition was still carried out as scheduled. At the beginning of the game, both sides tried their best to start the attack. Although the two belonged to the same training ground, they were in a relationship of life and death in the gladiatorial competition. The two sides fought back and forth, presenting a fairly wonderful performance to the audience. In the end, the gods protected Vero even more, allowing him to defeat his opponent in the game. Even so, when Vero came back, he was already bruised and swollen. He gnashed his teeth and cried out in pain. After Vero, it was Xia Changqing's turn to appear. Xia, may the gods also bless you and help you win. Vero sent his blessings. Xia Changqing chose a small and light shield, held the dagger in his right hand, turned back and smiled at Vero. I'm an Orientalist, your gods will not protect me. After that, Xia Changqing put on a helmet, looked at the scene outside through the mask like a fishing net, adapted to this special perspective, and then strode to the center of the arena. He comes from the mysterious east and possesses mysterious power. He is a strong man from the east. Xia. Batiatus introduced Xia Changqing's situation with emotion. Of course there are some exaggerations in it. If the introduction is not exaggerated, how can it arouse the interest of the audience? In fact, because Xia Changqing was from the east, many people showed interest in him. Some people suddenly remembered that Xia Changqing, like Spartacus, had fought his way out of the Anubis Elder arena, which immediately caused another round of cheers. They couldn't wait to see how this Oriental boy performed. Batiatus finished his introduction and announced the official start of the game. Xia Changqing clenched his shield and dagger. He looked at his opponent who was in a defensive posture and had no intention of slowly grinding with him. He wanted to finish the game as soon as possible and show his style. Only by showing his strength could he face a stronger opponent. The system required him to become a strong warrior. If he wanted to become a strong warrior, he couldn't train himself. Only after experiencing the trial of blood and fire could he truly grow up. Unlike being low-key in the training ground, Xia Changqing's current strength could not be grown by training. This first battle, let's take it down quickly and neatly. Xia Changqing strode towards his opponent. His speed was not very fast at first, just like taking a walk after dinner, but as he approached his opponent, his speed began to rise rapidly. Xia Changqing's opponent was Xia, who had a word carved on his forehead. The two were in the same training ground, so he naturally knew how strong Xia Changqing was. Although that was only a part of Xia Changqing's strength, Xia also thought that he was not comparable to him. After all, he passed the assessment with difficulty, while Xia Changqing defeated Nias, who was at the top of the strength. So after seeing Xia Changqing running towards him, Xia chose a defensive posture very cautiously. He held the wide rectangular shield in front of him, revealing only a small part of his face, and stared at Xia Changqing's movements. Xia Changqing did not hide his intentions at all. He held the small shield in front of him, and hit him hard. Bang! When the violent collision sounded, Xia had never expected Xia Changqing's strength to be so great. After this collision, he could not control the shield in his hand at all. The shield in Xia's hand flew up uncontrollably, and then hit his body, still with unabated momentum, bringing his body to the ground. Ugh! Xia cried out in pain, his naked back rubbing against the sand and stones in the arena, causing a burst of pain in his back. Before Xia could recover, he felt a chill on his neck, and Xia Changqing had already put the sword on his neck. Xia dared not move. Although he was wearing a helmet on his head, his neck had no protection. As long as Xia Changqing exerted a little force, his throat would be cut. The entire game, from start to finish, took only 2 minutes. The audience in the arena didn't even react to what happened, and the game was over. A moment later, a huge cheer came. Although some spectators were still wondering if it was because Xia was too weak that he was defeated so easily. But Xia Changqing's overwhelming victory still touched the G-spot of some spectators, and many people paid attention to this mysterious Oriental man. In the stands, Batiatus was also somewhat shocked. He had just finished his speech and sat down. Was the battle over? However, looking at the 2 fingers of Xia's right hand extended, which represented a gesture of surrender, Batiatus still stood up and praised Xia Changqing dryly. Chapter 68, Fiasco. In the stands, Batiatus's expression was a little tangled. What's going on? The battle is over now? Okay, let's thank Xia and Xia for their wonderful performance. Well, in fact, this game was not exciting at all. It ended too quickly. Anyway, Xia Changqing at least had some fame among the audience in Capua, and some people began to pay attention to this Oriental man. Xia Changqing returned to the cage below the arena. Vero touched the wound on his face and looked at Xia Changqing in disbelief. Why, Vero, are you shocked by my strength? Xia Changqing said with a smile. Shit. If Keza wasn't such a waste, how could you win so easily? Vero said stubbornly. He would not admit that Xia Changqing's strength was too strong. While the two people were bickering, the game in the arena was still going on. Compared with Xia Changqing's overwhelming victory, the games of others were much more bloody. There must be casualties between the two. The bodies of the dead gladiators were dragged away by the slaves in the arena. Such a cruel scene made the audience cheer and forget everything else. The games were played one by one, and soon they came to the last game. A duel between the brave generals. On one side was the undefeated king, the champion of Capua, Crescent. On the other side was the Thracian Spartacus, who was famous far and wide. The duel between the two must be a very exciting game. When Basiatus announced the start of the game, Spartacus took the lead in launching a violent attack on Crescent. Xia Changqing, who was standing on the periphery and watching, frowned slightly unconsciously. Spartacus is too impulsive. The way he chose is wrong. He will definitely suffer if he continues like this. Vero, isn't Spartacus in the upper hand? You see, he has been attacking all the time, while Chris is completely on the defensive. Xia Changqing shook his head. You only see Chris defending, but you don't see that he is in a leisurely state. When Chris really starts to exert his strength, Spartacus will be in trouble. Unexpectedly, as soon as Xia Changqing finished speaking, Spartacus's physical strength was too much after the violent attack in the arena. Chris seized the opportunity and made a clever turn. The rectangular shield, carrying the rotating force, hit Spartacus hard. Spartacus fell to the ground in the arena. The attack just now consumed too much of his physical strength. Now after being knocked down by Chris, he didn't even get up at the first time. Fortunately, Chris did not pursue the victory. He didn't expect Spartacus to be so vulnerable. He took off his helmet and stood in the middle of the arena, enjoying the cheers of the audience. Spartacus lay on the ground for a long time before getting up. Spartacus is going to lose. He underestimates his opponent and is reckless. This will cost him his life. I just don't know if he can put down his pride and surrender to Crescent. I think it's hard. Spartacus is a proud man. He would rather die in the arena than surrender to Crescent. Vero remembered what Spartacus said in training. It was still vivid in his mind. Because he said that he would never admit defeat, he was thrown into a cesspool by Docket. On the other side, after passively defending for such a long time, Crescent finally launched a counterattack. His attack suddenly hit Spartacus like a storm. No one expected that Spartacus, who was full of confidence before the game, was not a match for Crescent in the game. The battle of the brave generals ended in a dramatic way. Spartacus was knocked to the ground, without the slightest power to fight back. Crescent squatted down, grabbed Spartacus' hair, and put the blade on Spartacus' neck. Crescent looked in the direction of Basiatus. As long as Basiatus gave an order, he would cut Spartacus' throat without hesitation. The audience cheered for Crescent. The people who had bought Spartacus' victory were cursing him with the most vicious words. Kill him. Kill this coward. Such words came out in an endless stream. The audience asked Crescent to kill Spartacus. They were extremely disappointed with Spartacus in their hearts. Basiatus had a tangled expression. He didn't want Spartacus to die in the first gladiatorial match. He spent a lot of money. At this moment, under the gaze of the audience, Spartacus slowly raised his right hand and stretched out his index and middle fingers. Stretching out two fingers meant that Spartacus expressed his surrender. Basiatus breathed a sigh of relief. He had a way out. Thanks to Spartacus and Crixus for bringing us such a wonderful performance. Spartacus performed very well. Let us spare his life and fight him again another day. The audience booed. Of course, they didn't buy it. Spartacus made them lose so much money, but he was still alive. Who would be willing to do that? Because of sparing Spartacus' life, the people of Capua were very disappointed with Basiatus. The gladiators returned to the training ground. Everyone could see that Basiatus was now furious. A minute of silence for Spartacus. Xia, have you heard that Basiatus is going to send Spartacus and Kurs to the underground arena? Underground arena? Xia Changqing cast a puzzled look at Vero. That's right, the underground arena. That's the grave of the gladiators. Unlike regular gladiatorial games, the underground arena has no rules. The only rule is to fight to the death. Vero's face showed a look of reminiscence. He had watched the game in the underground arena before. It was a chaotic place, which made people unconsciously show the manic side of their bones. If Spartacus went to the underground arena, he really wouldn't have a chance to survive. Vero sighed and looked at Xia Changqing in silence. They all knew that Batiatus had made a big fool of Spartacus, and now he was heavily in debt. He would definitely squeeze Spartacus to death. And Spartacus was still thinking about Batiatus to help him find his wife, and he didn't dare to resist Batiatus' decision. Xia Changqing, Vero and others resumed their usual training, and because of the defeat, Spartacus and Kos were taken to the underground arena by Batiatus. They will use the last of their abilities to bring some monetary gain to their master Batiatus. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69 Shadow of Death. The first day Spartacus went to the underground arena. When he went there, he and Keys were the only ones there. When he came back, Spartacus was the only one left. Keys didn't even make it through one round before he died in the underground arena. Spartacus was also covered in blood and had suffered serious injuries. However, Batiatus had no intention of giving up. Spartacus' victory had already brought him sweetness and filled his pockets with dinars. After letting Spartacus take a short rest for a few days, Batiatus took him on the road to the underground arena again. As far as Xia Changqing could see, Spartacus's condition was getting worse day by day. He would soon face his deadline and might die in the underground arena one day. However, what Xia Changqing didn't expect was that Spartacus's matter would actually usher in a turn for the better. Someone tried to assassinate Batiatus in the underground arena. Barca was unable to defeat 4 people with his 2 fists, and Batiatus was injured. Thanks to Spartacus who rescued him in an emergency. After surviving the disaster, Batiatus was grateful to Spartacus and allowed him to return to the ranks of gladiators. Spartacus is worthy of being the protagonist of this era. He is blessed with a long life. After experiencing the training in the underground arena, he seems to have settled down and become much more stable. Bang, bang. The sound of training swords hitting wooden shields is endless. The weather is hot and there is no sign of rain. The gladiators are facing each other in pairs and training against each other. Sweat flows down their bodies and soon a pool of water accumulates under their feet. Stop, take a break and continue. With Docket's order, the gladiators can't wait to run out of the shadows to enjoy the rare coolness. This damn weather is really hot. Vero complained. His eyes turned and he licked his dry lips. Who of you has water? Give me a sip. I'm dying of thirst. Vero, you are too greedy. You still want to drink water. Now I can't even pee. Spartacus joked, and as he spoke, he sighed. His mouth was dry, and he didn't even want to talk. Look at Xia. He doesn't complain at all. Xia Changqing sat slumped in the corner, closed his eyes and rested, as calm as an old monk in meditation. You can save some energy if you talk less. Today is still a long day. Xia Changqing said in a light tone without opening his eyes. Get up, let's continue training. Less than 10 minutes after resting, Docket began to urge them to continue training. No one wanted to try the taste of being whipped. The gladiators walked out of the shadows in 2s and 3s, lined up, and continued training. Just looking at the weak gladiators, Docket couldn't help but feel a little worried. Long-term lack of water would cause problems for these gladiators who were training intensively. However, if the gods in the sky didn't rain, he had no way to deal with it. Before the thoughts in his mind dissipated, Docket saw a gladiator who was training suddenly fall to the ground. Docket stopped the decision to feed water to the fainted gladiator and just asked someone to carry him into the house. Water was too scarce, and every bit of it could be saved was a bit of saving. Although some gladiators had fainted on the ground, those who needed to be trained still had to be trained. Just as everyone was training, the voice of Batiatus suddenly came from the balcony on the 2nd floor. He asked the gladiators to stop training first, and the administrator had a task to arrange. Xia Changqing calmly put down the sword and shield in his hand, and looked at Vero. The eyes of the 2 people revealed the same message at the same time. Another gladiator fight must be about to begin. As Xia Changqing expected, in order to pray for rain from the gods in the sky, the administrator of Capua held a special gladiatorial contest to please the gods with blood. The purpose of the administrator personally coming to Basiutus was to select a brave general to fight against the brave general sent by Solonius, the Shadow of Death. The name of the Shadow of Death was horrifying among the gladiators of Capua. Among all the gladiators who had fought against him, only the current trainer Docket survived, and all the others died. Basiutus realized that this was not a fair fight, but Solonius had already anticipated this. He proposed to the administrator that Spartacus and Crescent fight the Shadow of Death together. If Basiutus is still afraid, then don't participate in the battle. Basiutus agreed on the spot, and Spartacus and Crescent fight the Shadow of Death together. It was not because of the provocation of the mortal enemy Solonius, but because the rewards given in this gladiatorial contest were too much. Regardless of winning or losing, Basiutus could use the money to pay off his debts, and there would be a lot of surplus. With so many rewards, Basiutus had no way to refuse. As for the life and death of Spartacus and Crescent, they were just slave gladiators, and Basiutus didn't care about their life and death at all. When this news was announced in the training ground, all the gladiators looked at Spartacus and Crescent with sympathy. Soon, the night came. Master Basiutus, Spartacus, and Crescent are no match for the Shadow of Death. Let me play. I was defeated by Theacus before, and this is my chance to avenge my previous shame. The person who spoke was the trainer Docket. Since he was defeated by the Shadow of Death, he has never participated in a gladiatorial contest again. After he struggled back from the brink of death, he became a trainer. Only Docket understood how terrible the Shadow of Death was. That's enough, Docket, I've made up my mind. You've already achieved your own glory, so don't think about playing anymore. Help me run the training ground. You're the only person I trust. Docket, but Master, Spartacus, and Crescent are no match for Theacus at all. They're just going to die. Basiutus said coldly, then let them die with more honor. After that, Basiutus strode away. Docket's heart was chilled. Basiutus' words were so cold and ruthless. He knew that this was an act of suicide, but he still insisted on letting Spartacus and Crescent go on the field. Thinking of himself from the two of them, Docket had a sense of enlightenment in his heart. If his death could also bring huge benefits, Basiutus would definitely not mind letting him die. But Docket quickly shook his head and threw away this rebellious idea. His life originally belonged to the Basiutus family. If it came to that, he didn't mind sacrificing himself. It's just a chilling feeling, but it's not something Docket can forget, just because he wants to. Chapter 70 Xia Changqing is caught in the crossfire. You guys disappoint me so much. Docket, holding two swords, beat Spartacus and Cress to a pulp. His fighting power was not comparable to that of the two. Even so, Docket was still no match for the Shadow of Death. With the current state of Spartacus and Cress, going to the arena would be a death-seeking act. It was the Thracians who held me back. Cress complained loudly. I was just giving you a hand. Spartacus replied dissatisfiedly. You were just wasting your time. Cress looked down on him. Shut up. Docket waved his training sword, interrupting the two men's words, and put his dark face in front of Cress. Crescent, do you think you are really an invincible champion? In my opinion, you are just an arrogant waste. Docket stared at Cress with eyes like copper bells. Why, are you not convinced? Cress did not speak, but just stared at Cress intently. Of course, he was not convinced in his heart. Okay, I'll convince you today. Docket suddenly turned his head and looked at the crowd watching the excitement. Xia, come out and fight with Chris. Me. Xia Changqing pointed at himself in surprise. It was true that when people were watching the excitement, things would happen from the sky. Docket, you are not kidding, are you? Of course I'm not kidding. Docket said seriously, use your true strength. If you lose to Chris, don't blame me for whipping you. Hey, Docket, you are totally unreasonable. Before Xia Changqing could say anything, Vero stood up to defend the injustice. Vero, I didn't ask you to stand up. Docket gave Vero a dangerous look. Before Vero could say anything else, Xia Changqing patted his shoulder and gave Vero a reassuring look. Xia Changqing was not surprised that Docket saw his hidden strength. Docket is an old gladiator with rich experience, otherwise he would not have become a trainer trusted by Batiatus. In fact, Xia Changqing was not very opposed to showing off his strength. Humans are essentially willing to obey the strong. Showing some strength now can also lay the foundation for leading the gladiators to revolt in the future. As you wish, Docket. Xia Changqing twisted his neck and went forward to take 2 training swords. He wanted to defeat Cress with the double sword style. Cress looked at Xia Changqing, who was ready, and then turned to look at Docket. A trace of shame and anger immediately appeared on his face. During the entire training ground, Xia Changqing did not enter Cress's eyes because he was too low-key. As the undefeated champion of Capua, Docket now actually thought that he was not a match for an Oriental man, which made Cress feel offended. Docket, I will prove you wrong. Oh. Then let's wait and see. Docket didn't care. He walked aside with his arms folded, leaving the training ground to Xia Changqing and Cress. Boy, are you ready to be beaten up? Cress had a fire in his heart, and he urgently needed to vent it. Since Docket had designated Xia Changqing, he could only vent it on Xia Changqing. I can only say, things are unpredictable. Cress, don't be too confident. Xia Changqing held the training sword in his hand, with his right arm on top and his left arm on the bottom, attacking each other. Cress still chose his most proficient sword and shield combination, and took an offensive posture. Cress roared, and took the lead in launching an attack. He swung the training sword, and chopped Xia Changqing from top to bottom. Cress didn't see how Xia Changqing dodged this sword at all. In the eyes of the surrounding gladiators, when Cress's attack came, Xia Changqing just turned his feet, and spun his body nimbly to the side of Cress. At the same time, Xia Changqing took advantage of Cress's forward force, before he ran out of it, and slapped his back with the training sword in his hand. Pa! A crisp sound rang out. A good sound means a good sword. Cress was slapped away by the sword. His body, which was about to stop rushing forward, flew forward and fell to the ground face down in embarrassment. Wow, how is it possible? Cress actually lost. Incredible noises rang out one after another. The gladiators in the same training ground had never realized that this Oriental boy was a master. On the other side, Cress did not suffer much damage. He rolled forward and stood up directly, but his eyes looking at Xia Changqing were full of shock. Pa! Cress spit out a mouthful of sand. Oriental boy, I underestimated you. Now I'm going to be serious. Xia Changqing stood straight in place, with a smile on his lips, the tip of his right sword pointing to the ground, and his left sword behind his back. The water dance sword technique inherited from Bravus is itself a sword technique that elite assassins, the faceless, must practice, and the focus is on dexterity. Xia Changqing learned the water dance from Eria, and after systematic processing, he had already surpassed the power of the water dance itself. Now Cress no longer had the intention to underestimate the enemy. He no longer attacked rashly, but raised his shield in front of him, and carefully tried to attack. After a few moves, Cress became more and more frightened. This Oriental boy was always able to dodge his attacks by a hair's breadth. This could not be described as lucky at all. Only when you have a high degree of control over your body can you dare to take such a risky action. So far, it was Cress who attacked, but he didn't even touch the corner of Xia Changqing's clothes. Cress's panting sound became heavier involuntarily, and there was a slight pause between his attacks. At this moment, Xia Changqing's sword, like an antelope hanging horns, slanted past Cress's shield and pointed at his chest. Cress's feet involuntarily took 2 steps back. On a hot day, cold sweat had already seeped out of his forehead, and Cress could feel the coolness of the sweat. Xia Changqing grinned at Cress and swung his sword to chop him up, using his right and left swords in turn, each sword hitting the same spot on Cress's shield. Cress felt extremely uncomfortable. His steps kept retreating, and his forehead was already covered with sweat. He only felt that Xia Changqing's attack frequency was not very fast, but he couldn't even find a chance to fight back, so he could only defend passively. And because Xia Changqing kept slashing at the same spot on the shield, Cress only felt that the shield in his hand was getting heavier and heavier, and finally it became so heavy that he couldn't control it at all, and was directly chopped away by Xia Changqing's sword. An evil voice came, and Xia Changqing's next sword had already fallen on Cress's head. Chapter 71 Capua Future Champion. Thank you, Cress. With the help of Xia Changqing's outstretched hand, Cress stood up in a daze. Who am I? Where am I? What should I do? Cress asked soul-searching questions in his heart. He never thought that he would be defeated so quickly. Docket, Cress, how about it? Now you know that there are always people better than you. Cress shook off Xia Changqing's hand and did not appreciate his kindness, but Xia Changqing did not care. Cress was undoubtedly a very proud person. Now he was defeated without any chance to fight back. It would be strange if he was willing. Docket, I don't accept it. I want to compete again. Cress opened his eyes angrily and stared at Xia Changqing, who was helpless. He was very dissatisfied in his heart. I don't think there's any need to compete anymore. Cress, even if you and Spartacus go together, you may not be Xia's opponent. Docket directly rejected Cress's request. If you and Spartacus still cooperate like this, you two will definitely die in the arena. Now what you have to do is to think about how to perfectly cooperate with Spartacus. After listening to Docket's words, Cress looked at Xia Changqing for a while and then reluctantly continued to practice cooperation with Spartacus. Xia Changqing returned to the gladiator team. Wherever he passed, everyone unconsciously made way, although they did not block Xia Changqing's way. Awesome, Xia, are you possessed by a god? Vero's eyes were full of amazement, as if he had just met Xia Changqing on the first day. The gods in the sky will not favor an oriental person, and I don't believe in them. Xia Changqing shrugged and joked. Which gods do you orientals believe in? I'm going to consider changing my faith. Vero, you dare to say that? Aren't you afraid of the gods' anger? The gods don't have time to pay attention to a gladiator. Vero said indifferently. Xia Changqing and Vero laughed, and the two stood together, watching the scene of Crescent and Spartacus being trained by Docket. Although Xia Changqing showed some of his strength and directly defeated the most powerful Crescent, Vero was only happy for him and did not alienate him at all. However, what Xia Changqing did not expect was that it didn't take long for him to hear that Basiatus had summoned him. The person who came to inform Xia Changqing was Asher. Xia Changqing looked at Asher meaningfully. He was sure that the fact that the training could be heard by Basiatus so quickly was inseparable from Asher's credit. Asher was originally a gladiator, but his gladiatorial skills were really not good. Later, after his leg was injured, he couldn't even participate in the training. But Asher has a smart mind, or it is more appropriate to describe this person as insidious and cunning. Therefore, Basiatus trusted Asher very much and entrusted many shady things to him. Asher is a sinister villain, like a poisonous snake, and you don't know when he will bite back. Brother Xia, Master Basiatus was very happy to hear that you defeated Crescent. He is now specially summoning you. It seems that you will be very successful. Asher smiled and narrowed his eyes together. He looked harmless and flattered him, as if he didn't care about money. When you become rich, don't forget to help your brother. If you have anything you want, just tell me. Asher can only do it and will never refuse. Asher said this to countless people. Xia Changqing naturally would not offend such a person for no reason. He replied with a smile on his face, looking like he was speaking from the heart. But what he thought in his heart, only he could know. Under Asher's guidance, Xia Changqing came to Basiatus' office. At the entrance, two guards stood, sandwiching Xia Changqing in the middle. Based on this situation, no matter how much Basiatus said, he still didn't trust Xia Changqing. Basiatus raised his head from the table and smiled what he thought was a kind smile. It should be said that this smile was from the bottom of Basiatus' heart. He was very friendly to the gladiators who could bring him benefits. Xia, your name is Xia, right? I heard that you are from the east. Yes. Ah, the distant east, the mysterious east. This is great. Basiatus said in an aria-like tone, and he stood up happily. Today I learned that your strength is not inferior to Crescent. Are you a noble in the east? I'm curious, how did you end up in Rome? It doesn't matter, does it? Xia Changqing raised his eyebrows. He was too lazy to make up excuses. You're right, that's not important. Basiatus showed an expression of sudden enlightenment, and he didn't know what he understood. A mysterious man from the Far East. He may be the son of a nobleman in a certain country, or the son of a general, or more likely a prince. Because of the rebellion in the country, you were forced to flee to Rome. This is really a touching story. The ladies in Rome will be crazy about you. They like to hear such stories. In a short moment, Batiatus has arranged Xia Changqing's future path clearly. Your imagination is too strong, right? Xia Changqing was speechless. He vaguely understood why Batiatus did this. In the eyes of everyone in the training ground, Crescent and Spartacus were dead in the next fight. And after these two people died, Batiatus would not be able to produce any decent gladiators. Now he suddenly heard that Xia Changqing easily defeated Crescent, and he must be very excited. Xia, you are destined to be the next champion of Capua. As long as you can bring victory to Batiatus, I can satisfy you with whatever you want. Money, beauty, comfortable accommodation. As long as you want it, you can get it all. Batiatus' words were passionate and very inspiring. However, although these things are good, they are not what Xia Changqing pursues. He wants freedom, which is something Batiatus will never agree to. Xia Changqing dared to guarantee that, if he put forward the conditions for setting him free now, Batiatus would definitely turn hostile immediately, and he might even be killed. Xia Changqing looked up at the excited Batiatus and replied calmly, "As you wish." Chapter 72. Who are the audience cheering for? I would rather you call me master, Batiatus said with a somewhat serious expression. His smile faded. Xia Changqing frowned slightly, but soon relaxed. He looked at Batiatus and said again, "As you wish, my master." Very good. Batiatus was happy. I look forward to your next performance. Then, Xia Changqing returned to the training ground with Asher. Along the way, he carefully memorized these routes. Xia Changqing didn't know if it would be useful to memorize these routes, but he still had to remember them. The days in the training ground were the same as before. After the last conversation, Xia Changqing did not receive any special treatment. A profit-seeking person like Batiatus would never treat Xia Changqing preferentially before Xia Changqing brought him definite benefits. Time passed quickly, and the day of the gladiatorial contest came in the blink of an eye. But Docket was still worried. The cooperation between Crescent and Spartacus was not perfect. It was hard to predict who would win or lose in the arena. For this very purposeful gladiatorial contest, the Archon prepared for a long time, and offered a large amount of rewards, just to please the gods, and make the sky rain. In addition to Spartacus and Crescent as the brave generals, to fight against the shadow of death, Batiatus' training ground also sent out 10 gladiators, to fight against the gladiators of the Salonius family one by one. Xia Changqing naturally had to play, but unlike the match during the Forging God Festival, he was arranged to be the last of the 10 to play, that is, before Spartacus and Crescent appeared. The carnival moment came soon, and after the Archon appeared, he officially announced the start of the game. The first gladiator sent by Batiatus was Vero. There was no way, although Batiatus also thought that Vero was worth training. He was indeed a newcomer, and the newcomers were still mainly accumulating experience. Although Vero was not satisfied with this, the bounty he got for leading the battle was too little, but he could not disobey Batiatus's orders at all. With the cheers of the crowd, Vero stepped into the arena holding a sword and a shield. The whole battle lasted for about 20 minutes. Vero successfully returned with only one wound on his waist. The gladiators went on stage one by one. Except for Spartacus and Chris, who were still being instructed by Docket, the others were watching the situation in the arena nervously. The gladiators on their side had wins and losses. The winners were cheered and applauded, and the losers lost their lives. Everyone was very open-minded about this kind of thing. Dying in the arena was the consciousness of every gladiator. Xia, it's your turn to go on stage, Vero called softly. Xia Changqing, who had been resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes, raised his dagger with a leisurely look, and walked towards the arena. Don't die in the arena, Oriental boy, I'm still waiting to defeat you with my own hands. Just as Xia Changqing was about to step out of the iron gate, Chris couldn't help but shout behind him. Xia Changqing looked back after hearing this. Chris, you should focus on how to defeat the shadow of death. Waving his hand, Xia Changqing left the lounge without looking back. Xia Changqing's opponent this time was the ace gladiator from the Salonius training ground, SYNOPSIS. SYNOPSIS' appearance also attracted cheers from the audience. Compared with the not so famous Xia Changqing, SYNOPSIS was much more popular. In the stands, Batiatus and Solinus introduced their gladiators one by one as usual. After sitting down, Solinus calmly stabbed Batiatus. Batius, is there no gladiator in your training ground? You actually sent such an unknown gladiator to fight against SYNOPSIS. If the gods are not satisfied with this match, it is all your fault, Batiatus. Batiatus's face changed immediately after hearing this. He glanced at the administrator's face obscurely and immediately retorted, Sorinus, you are happy now, but when SYNOPSIS is defeated, I wonder if you can still be happy. Oh. It seems that you are very confident in this kid from the east. Batiatus, do you want to gamble? Okay, I'll bet 10 dinars on the Oriental to win. Batiatus looked at his mortal enemy coldly. He would never give in. Standing in the arena, Xia Changqing had no idea that Batiatus had already bet 10 dinars on him. No problem. For Batiatus now, 10 dinars are already a great fortune. He can only hope that Xia Changqing will win this game cleanly. As for Xia Changqing, he has no intention of wasting time. He is also very interested in the shadow of death, which makes all gladiators shudder. He can't wait to see the grace of the shadow of death. As the Archon gave the order to start the game, Xia Changqing and SYNOPSIS started charging at the same time. Just when SYNOPSIS thought that the next development of the matter was just a collision between the two, and then he would win with absolute strength, Xia Changqing made a move that he never expected. When the two were about to collide with each other, Xia Changqing stepped hard on the ground, bent his calves and exerted force, and the whole person jumped directly into the air. SYNOPSIS raised his head and subconsciously held the shield in front of him. He judged that Xia Changqing would slash down from a high place. Unexpectedly, Xia Changqing jumped over SYNOPSIS' head. Amid the exclamations of the audience, he turned and chopped in midair. When Xia Changqing landed and half knelt on the ground to cushion the impact of the jump from the air, SYNOPSIS' figure was still running forward under the action of inertia. 1 step, 2 steps. SYNOPSIS' whole body suddenly fell to the ground, and blood gushed out from the back of his neck, soon staining the ground of the arena red. How can a person jump so high? In his dying moments, SYNOPSIS had only this thought in his mind. After a moment of silence in the stands, crazy cheers suddenly broke out. Great. Well done. Batiatus clenched his fists, his face full of excitement. At this moment, there was really no language to describe his excitement at the moment. Then Batiatus looked at Solinus provocatively. After seeing the ugly face of his mortal enemy, Batiatus felt even happier. In the arena, Xia Changqing did not stand there to enjoy the cheers of the audience, but turned and walked towards the lounge. This cold and domineering attitude conquered many audiences. Chapter 73, Narrow Victory. Haha, Xia, well done. As soon as Xia Changqing returned to the lounge, Vero rushed over excitedly, punched him in the chest, and shouted excitedly, your sword is really like a miracle. Okay, Vero, don't get so close to me. I'm not interested in men. Xia Changqing said with a smile of disdain. Get lost, I'm not interested in men either. Vero was stunned and said unhappily. Other gladiators who were not very familiar with Xia Changqing now looked at him with complicated and awe-inspiring eyes. Even Chris could not do such a magical sword. The weight of the gladiators was already very heavy. No matter how strong their jumping ability was, it was impossible for them to jump over a person's head and perform such a complicated action in midair. In the crowd, Chris pursed his lips tightly, his eyes full of unwillingness. He was getting more and more uncertain about defeating Xia Changqing. But whether he could defeat Xia Changqing or not was not mentioned first. He and Spartacus were about to appear in the arena. Because of the arrival of the grand finale, the audience immediately forgot about Xia Changqing and cheered for Chris. As the champion of Capua, Chris has been famous for a long time, and the audience is naturally familiar with him. Enjoying the cheers from the audience, Chris was intoxicated, which made him forget the troubles brought by Xia Changqing for a while. Capua, Chris shouted with a laugh. But with the appearance of the shadow of death, the cheers on the field stopped for a while. The shadow of death, Theacus, was 2 meters and 4 meters tall, like a little giant. The 2 swords in his hands were also much longer than ordinary competitive swords. However, except for the 2 swords, he did not wear any armor. His naked upper body was covered with hideous wounds, which made people know what kind of terrible battle he had experienced at a glance. The shadow of death strode into the arena. He was taken by his momentum. The whole arena was silent, and it seemed that he dared not even breathe. I don't know if it's an illusion, but with the appearance of the shadow of death, the sky has become a little gloomy. Kapua. Suddenly, the shadow of death raised his sword and shouted, revealing his fangs like a beast. Roar! The audience became excited, and they shouted wildly, and they didn't care, even if their voices were hoarse. Start. Then, the Archon gave an order, and the battle officially started. The shadow of death roared, and rushed towards Spartacus and Crescent. The two huge swords, in the hands of the shadow of death, danced back and forth, like a rotating windmill, hitting the shield, and the violent collision sound was endless. Crescent and Spartacus looked at each other, and the two launched attacks from the flanks of the shadow of death. Although the shadow of death's attack was swift, his defense was also very weak. Not long after, Crescent and Spartacus found an opportunity, and left many wounds on his body. Blood was splattering wantonly, and the three gladiators roared again and again, and the sky seemed to be even gloomier. At a certain moment, Spartacus and Chris seized the opportunity tacitly, and together they left two hideous wounds on the chest of the shadow of death. The shadow of death fell to the ground with a bang. Cheers rang out. Chris and Spartacus took off their helmets, laughed and enjoyed the fruits of victory. They did not expect that the shadow of death would be so easy to deal with, and was simply vulnerable. However, the cheers did not last long, and the audience's surprise attracted the attention of the two people. When Spartacus and Chris turned around, they saw that the shadow of death had already stood up again, holding two long swords. The two wounds on his chest that were still bleeding did not seem to affect the shadow of death at all. He showed his fangs and roared like a beast. Kapua, is it my turn to attack? The inhuman physique gave the shadow of death inhuman combat power. Facing the attack again, Chris and Spartacus suddenly became flustered. The discord between the two gradually affected the battle situation. Chris disliked Spartacus for being in the way, and went up alone. At the beginning, Chris actually had the upper hand. He pierced the Death Shadow's abdomen with a sword. However, what Chris never expected was that the Death Shadow seemed to be unaware of this injury, and instead used his body to block Cress's dagger. Bang! The Death Shadow hit Cress's head hard with a head hammer. Cress immediately felt like he was struck by lightning and felt dizzy. The Death Shadow laughed loudly, pulled out the dagger stuck in his abdomen with his backhand, and slashed Cress's chest from the abdomen. The unbearable pain came, and Cress's whole mind seemed to be stagnant, unable to make any defensive or counterattack movements. The Death Shadow slashed Cress's back with another sword, causing Cress to fall to the ground like a rag doll, on the verge of death. Theacus. Spartacus roared, preventing the Death Shadow from chopping off Cress's head. He jumped up and pounced on the Death Shadow like a warrior launching a final charge. However, the two of them were no match for the Shadow of Death, let alone Spartacus alone. After two moves, Spartacus was at a disadvantage and couldn't even fight back. At this moment, Chris struggled to do the only thing he could do. The sun shone through the gap in the clouds. Chris picked up the helmet that fell to the side and reflected the sun on the shadow of death's eyes. Suddenly exposed to the sun, the shadow of death felt a stinging pain in his eyes and a golden glow in front of him, and he couldn't see anything clearly. At a great opportunity, Spartacus rolled nimbly and came behind the shadow of death. Spartacus roared, slashed with his dagger, and with a strong blow, he directly cut off one of the shadow of death's legs. The pain of the broken leg made the shadow of death roar angrily, but he had no chance to fight back. Spartacus swung his sword back and cut off the other leg of shadow of death. Shadow of death, who Spartacus had to look up at, could only look down after losing his legs. Die. Spartacus jumped up with all his strength and chopped at Shadow of Death's neck with his dagger. In a moment, Shadow of Death's neck was already a bloody mess. Kill him. Kill him. The audience who had watched a wonderful game were now constantly asking Spartacus to kill Shadow of Death. Spartacus did not hesitate. Shadow of Death was already doomed to die in this state, so he might as well kill him directly. Chapter 74 for Freedom. Xia Changqing didn't expect that when Spartacus killed the Shadow of Death, it suddenly rained. Kapua, which had been dry for several months, finally welcomed the rain. That night, in the gladiator training ground of Batiatus, all the gladiators were cheering for Spartacus. The winner gets everything, and Spartacus also got several new titles. The Messenger of Rain, the Hero of Killing Shadows, the new Champion of Capua. Everyone was cheering for Spartacus, and for a moment, no one thought of Crescent, who was still on the verge of death. Batiatus made a lot of money, and was extremely excited to make new armor and weapons for Spartacus. As for making Xia Changqing the next champion of Capua, Batiatus had already forgotten it. Xia, Vero, I have good news for you. Spartacus came over excitedly. Batiatus has found Xia. We will be reunited soon. Xia Changqing and Vero looked at each other, and were also happy for Spartacus. Congratulations. Although Xia Changqing knew that this matter would end in tragedy, he had no way to stop it now. He didn't know how Batiatus arranged it, and when Xia would arrive. It was impossible to prevent this from happening in advance. It was just that Spartacus regarded him and Vero as best friends, and Xia Changqing really didn't want the tragedy to happen. Spartacus. Xia Changqing hesitated for a moment and finally said, have you ever thought that Batiatus would not be so kind as to let you and your wife reunite? Spartacus looked at Xia Changqing in surprise, with a trace of solemnity in his eyes. Of course I know that Batiatus wants to use Xia to control me, so I have decided that when Xia arrives, I will take her away, and I will not let Xia become a slave. Facing his two good friends, Spartacus slowly told his plan. Xia Changqing had expected this, but Vero was horrified. Spartacus, are you crazy? There are so many gladiators and guards, and you have no weapons. How can you run away? Vero whispered to persuade. Vero, I have made up my mind. You don't need to persuade me. I will not let Xia become a slave. Spartacus was determined, and for freedom, he was willing to give it a try. Xia, persuade him quickly. Vero looked at Xia Changqing anxiously. However, Xia Changqing looked at Spartacus with a firm face, and nodded in agreement. I agree with Spartacus's approach. Xia, how come even you? Before Vero finished speaking, Xia Changqing waved his hand. Spartacus, I wonder if you are willing to believe me? Well, Xia, why do you say that? Of course I believe you, otherwise I wouldn't tell you such a thing. Listen to me, Spartacus. Batiatus won't let you reunite with your wife. Seeing that Spartacus trusted him so much, Xia Changqing finally couldn't help but tell him what he knew. How is it possible? Batiatus has already told me that Sulla is on the way to Capua. Xia Changqing shook his head slowly. Batiatus only agreed to reunite you and your wife, but didn't say that Sulla would live and reunite with you. Xia, do you mean that Batiatus wants to harm Sulla? Spartacus thought of this possibility, and his face turned pale and changed. Vero's eyes could not hide the horror. Xia, you are kidding. How dare Batiatus do this? Why doesn't he dare to do this? Or, what else does Batiatus dare not do? He wants to control Spartacus, so he will never let Xia reunite with you. You have been in the training ground for so long. Don't you know what kind of person Batiatus is? What should I do? I can't let Xia get into trouble. Spartacus muttered to himself, completely panicked. I'm going to find Batiatus and ask him in person. Seeing Spartacus in this state, Xia Changqing couldn't help but scold. Are you stupid or crazy? How could Batiatus tell you the truth? Then I'll catch him, and threatened him with his life. Spartacus gritted his teeth. Spartacus, don't be impulsive. What Xia said may not be true. You have to calm down. Vero couldn't help but persuade. No, Vero, what Xia said makes sense. It concerns Xia's safety. I dare not gamble at all. Xia Changqing, wait. Spartacus, Vero is right. Don't be impulsive. With so many gladiators and guards, you can't succeed at all. You will only give up your life. Even if I help you, we have to plan it well. Spartacus looked at Xia Changqing with some gratitude. Xia, this is my own business. How can I let you take risks? Xia Changqing waved his hand and said indifferently, Spartacus, you are wrong. I'm not doing this for you, but for my own freedom. Freedom? Vero murmured and repeated this word. Only after losing his freedom did he understand how precious freedom is. What do you think, Vero? Why do you want to follow us? Me? Hearing Xia Changqing's question, Vero showed a hesitant expression on his face. He voluntarily sold himself as a slave to become a gladiator. Vero, you don't have to give us an answer now. You can think about it carefully, but I hope you can understand that Batiatus is not a good person, and being a gladiator is also a dangerous profession. Of course, if we escape, the danger we encounter may be greater. Just think about it yourself. No matter what your choice is, we are best friends. Xia Changqing patted Vero's shoulder and said soothingly. Vero's hesitation remained unchanged. He really needed to think about it carefully. Xia, are you really willing to help me? Spartacus asked again without any sense of security. Spartacus, I've already said that I'm doing this for my own freedom, not just to help you. And we need to take a long-term view on this matter. We need to unite the strength of most of the gladiators. We can't accomplish anything on our own. However, Spartacus shook his head with some worry. No one will support us. We will risk death at any time. Xia Changqing smiled non-committally and retorted, gladiators are also a profession, where they can die at any time. There is no slave who does not yearn for freedom. Freedom is like sweet poison, something that people will flock to. Chapter 75, Either Freedom or Death. After the conversation with Spartacus that night, Xia Changqing began to prepare for his departure. Since they would have to leave sooner or later anyway, they might as well help Spartacus. And if they wanted to leave, they needed the help of allies. Looking at the entire training ground, there were only a few who could become allies. Most of the gladiators were content with the status quo and would live a life of drunkenness and dreaming when they had the chance and die in the arena one day. Originally, Crescent could be a very good ally. He not only fell in love with the slave girl beside Lydia, but also hated Lydia's constant demands on him. However, in the match against the Shadow of Death, Crescent was seriously injured. It was still unclear whether he could survive now, and he certainly could not become their ally. After observing for a while, Xia Changqing set his sights on another powerful person in the training ground, the beast of Carthage, Barca. Barca yearned for freedom. In this competition, he won a large sum of money from Asher, enough for him and Pyrrhus to redeem themselves. Pyrrhus was also a slave, serving as the assistant of trainer Docket in the training ground. His other identity was Barca's lover. Xia Changqing did not discriminate against the love view of men on men. He knew that the redemption and freedom that Barca longed for would lead him to the abyss, so Xia Changqing did not mind giving him a hand. In fact, Asher had no money to lose to Barca. Under Barca's repeated coercion, the insidious and cunning Asher, after hearing some unexpected things, came up with a vicious plan. When Xia Changqing came to talk to Barca, he saw Asher standing outside Barca's door as expected. Xia Changqing did not alarm the snake. He hid in the corner and waited until Asher left. Then he showed up and walked out and knocked on Barca's door. Who? Hearing the knock on the door, Barca was startled. What he had just said to Pyrrhus was a secret among secrets. If someone reported it to Batiatus, he would definitely be killed, not to mention redeeming himself. Barca, it's me, Xia. Can't you open the door and invite me in? Xia Changqing said loudly outside the door. Xia. Barca and Pyrrhus looked at each other. Both of them had doubts in their eyes. They had never had anything to do with Orientals. The door was opened. Xia Changqing walked into the room, looked around leisurely, and said shockingly, I just saw Asher standing outside your door. I don't know what he heard, and he left in a hurry. Asher? Barca's face quickly turned ugly. What did he hear? What he heard? The key is what you said. Barca, as far as I know, you won a lot of money from Asher, and you want to redeem yourself and Pyrrhus. How do you know these things? Barca looked at Xia Changqing vigilantly, not understanding what Xia Changqing's purpose was for a moment. Barca, I know a lot of things. I also know that Asher has no money to compensate you, and your redemption plan can't be realized at all. Are you here just to laugh at me? Asher can't afford to pay the money. That's my and his business. It has nothing to do with you, right? Barca looked like he was refusing to let anyone in. Don't get excited, Barca. Although I have nothing to do, I will never come here to laugh at you. On the contrary, my purpose of coming here is to save your life. Save my life? My life is not in danger? Barca was puzzled. Xia Changqing chuckled. Barker may be a powerful gladiator, but his character is a bit simple. I think you must know what Asher heard outside the door. If Beishiotus knows about this, what do you think Beishiotus will do to you? Xia Changqing said directly. Barker's expression changed suddenly. Even if he was simple, he could figure out the reason. Impossible. Master Beishiotus will believe me. Believe you? Barker, are you deceiving yourself? You have been with Beishiotus for so long. You must know what kind of person he is. As long as Beishiotus has a little doubt, he will never let you leave alive. Xia Changqing did not hesitate to pierce Barker's fantasy. Barker, don't you understand? Trouble comes from the mouth. Even if this incident didn't happen, how could Beishiotus let you go so easily? Freedom is not given by others, but earned by yourself. Barker, what should we do? Otherwise, let's go and explain to Master Beishiotus. Hearing this, Pyrrhus was completely panicked. He looked at Barker eagerly, waiting for the other party to make a decision. Xia, tell me the purpose of your coming here. I don't believe you are so kind. Barker looked at Xia Changqing with distrust. Hearing this, Xia Changqing shrugged his shoulders, and after a slight hesitation, he still revealed a little bit of his purpose. You are for freedom. Of course I'm for freedom too. Xia Changqing said in a low voice, and he looked at Barker sincerely. We are all for freedom. This is what we have in common. No freedom, no death. Freedom. What are you going to do, and how many people support you? Barker's heart was moved. He had to admit that what Xia Changqing said made sense. With Beishiotus's character, if he found any signs of betrayal from him, he would never let him go. Barker, let's cooperate. Spartacus is also our ally. You have been in the training ground for so many years, you must have won over many people. Spartacus? Pyrrhus exclaimed in disbelief. He just became the champion of Capua. How could he agree to such a thing? Nothing is impossible. You know that Beishiotus agreed to let Spartacus and his wife reunite, but you didn't know that Beishiotus would kill Spartacus' wife in advance. Barker and Pyrrhus could not hide their horror on their faces. They didn't expect that the nominal number one in the training ground had already rebelled. However, if Beishiotus really wanted to do this, Spartacus' choice was understandable. Barker looked at Pyrrhus. If Beishiotus was not good for Pyrrhus, he would definitely rebel. No, now he has rebelled. Xia, I will persuade some gladiators to join us. But I can't guarantee how many people there will be. No problem. Quality is more important than quantity, but this matter must be carried out in secret. Also, be careful of Asher. He will definitely report it to Beishiotus. I can't guarantee that we will be ready by then. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.